Hello, and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here, as always, to talk about stuff for the new year, 2016.
Yes. The newest year we've got in stock.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Newest year we got in stock. And Sean, This is Season 5 of this podcast.
Whatever the fuck that means.
The 5th year. I just call it that in my notes, in my file list of all the podcasts, but this is... We started this particular incarnation of the show. It was called WGTC Radio at the beginning, but the numbering has continued.
Yeah.
The hosts have obviously continued. In May of 2012, so we had 2012, 13, 14, 15, and now we are in 16. This is the 5th year.
Yeah, God.
That's a sobering thought.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a disconcerting thought in some ways.
Yeah.
It's scary. I don't like it.
It is a scary thought. So... Yeah, we have a lot to talk about today. We were off for about a week and a half, 2 weeks there.
Yeah.
Which was didn't feel guilty. It was the holidays. People take their time off on podcasts. It's okay.
Yeah, it was, we have our break between seasons, our customary 2-week break between our seasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and we're planning to keep going weekly, so no worries there. But yeah, we've got a lot to catch up on because, customarily, if you're new to the show and you haven't listened to our previous, start of the year episodes, that's when we do our year in review stuff.
Yeah.
We do our video game top 10s, movie top 10s, TV show, whatever top 10s we want to do, other reflective pieces, and then as massive Doctor Who fans, we've got the Doctor Who Christmas special to talk about.
Yep.
We have movies to talk about, other things that have been going on. So we are going to roughly split this episode probably in two, unless it turns out we have nothing to say about any of these things.
Yeah.
But one part will be us talking we're going to start this show and we're just going to catch up and do those little things. And then we'll build up to the top 10 list as we usually do. And maybe it'll be 2 episodes. We'll see.
Yeah. Play it by ear.
Play it by ear.
It's the weekly stuff way.
It is. It is indeed.
We have no idea what we're doing.
Speaking of stuff. So... Let's get the new year started off right with just random stuff. Sean, anything in particular you've been up to you wanted to mention on the podcast?
I've been playing a lot of a game that I was not expecting to start playing, and I just saw it was out and saw some videos of it, and I started playing it, and it's this game called Earth Defense Force 4.1, The Shadow of New Despair.
I have seen, every time I've launched my PS4, you've been playing that.
Yes, I have.
It must be good.
I think it's a really good game, but it's a game that I can't recommend to people.
Okay.
Because if people don't know what Earth Defense Force is, it's a series of Japanese games that I think goes all the way back to PlayStation 2, although I don't think most of them have come out over here. And it's basically, it's like a video game version of, what in Japan you call a tokusatsu show, or movie, that generally means special effects, and that can include anything from Power Rangers to Godzilla. And it's that kind of stuff. It's about aliens invading the Earth, and you are the member of the Earth Defense Force that is tasked with fighting off the aliens or the giant insects or the dragons or the giant Godzilla monsters, whatever the fuck happens to be attacking Tokyo at the moment, and you just lay waste to shit. And that's what the whole series is basically about. And I played Earth Defense Force 2017 when that came out on the Xbox 360 and enjoyed that with a friend playing a lot of co-op.
And this is a prequel, right?
I don't know what well, no, because this is an expansion pack / remake to Earth Defense Force 2025, which was the sequel to Earth Defense Force 2017, which I think is technically in the main line of Earth Defense Force games, the 4th Earth Defense Force. So they called this Earth Defense Force 4.1. And then they put on the greatest subtitle of all time, The Shadow of New Despair, which
that is so great.
Every time I see that, I just get a big smile on my face. But the long and short of it is, with Earth Defense Force, is that it is a game who, emulating those tokusatsu shows and sort of that kind of monster B-movie stuff, it's a game where its ambition far outreaches its actual sort of power to capitalize on any of it. So it's a very technically messy game, and it doesn't give a shit that it just is constantly throwing more stuff at you than the game can actually handle. So it's basically every single level of the game, and each level just ups the last one and just becomes more and more ridiculous. Is you just get dropped in, you have whatever weapons you took with you, and you get to unlock new weapons as you play through missions and increase your health and stuff like that. And you just have laser guns and lightning rifles and all this crazy shit. And just swarms of, early on, it's just swarms of giant ants. And just, when I say swarms of giant ants, I mean literally hundreds of enemies. It's in one level. And you just lay waste to them, and it's fucking ridiculous. And if this is a game, if you are someone who's very uncomfortable with ants or spiders or hornets, and you just want to kill millions, and when I say millions, I'm not exaggerating, that is the number of giant insects I've killed in this game, this is the game for you, because you kill the fuck out of a lot of giant insects.
That is a hell of a recommendation. We give a lot of, recommendations on this podcast for things we like, and we usually do that. Like, if you like this, that is the weirdest one we've ever given.
I mean, it's something where, it's not a game I can recommend to most people, but if you are someone who really loves the sort of heart and spirit of those kinds of shows, like the Godzilla sequels, or like Super Sentai Rangers, or Ultraman, or anything like that, where, the budget and the production is what it is, but the ideas of what it's trying to capture, of like the scope of this alien invasion, is so magnificent that it's like, even if it just captures 1% of how cool the idea it's going for is, that's still way more awesome than most other things. This is the only game I've ever played, and this is true of all the Earth Defense Force games, or at least I've played 2 of them, I assume it's true of the other ones as well. It's the only game that does that. It's the only game that has that B-movie quality that makes B-movies good, and that it has a huge amount of ambition, but it does not have the technical quality to match up to it. But its ambition is far more impressive than most games that come out.
The heart is there, the head just isn't quite at the same pace.
Yeah, but, there are just parts in this game that are, it just gets so insane at some point, where there are enemies that are so ridiculously massive, and, there's a Godzilla monster that's basically just a ripoff of Godzilla, and it pops up periodically in different missions, and you're never able to kill it. And then eventually, once you get far enough, you unlock a mission where you're going to fight this monster, and then they just drop in this massive robot, and you pilot the robot, and it's the first time that's ever introduced. It's not set up, it comes out of nowhere, and you just get in this giant robot, and you just punch the shit out of this giant dinosaur monster, and it's the greatest thing ever. And it's again, the technical qualities of the game are not amazing. Anyone that looks at it would be able to tell that. But, there's something about it that I can really admire, that they don't give a shit if, the physics can be really buggy, and that the graphics don't look very good, and the draw distance is really weird and stuff like that. That they sacrifice all of that shit because they don't care. What they want is, scale. And they just... If that's all you want, that's what they're going for. And no other game, no other developer is willing to do that, to sacrifice this really important part of the game experience so that you can just pump up some other aspect of it to fucking 12 and just be amazing in that way.
And it's interesting to me because we're gonna, when we get to our top 10 list, I also have a top 5 list of my biggest video game disappointments of 2015.
Yeah.
And I would say a recurring theme on there is games that didn't quite know what they wanted to be.
Yeah.
And if you know what you want to be in any kind of art, that's the biggest and first step towards making something that is worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're describing. And I just love, this is probably not a game I'll ever play, but I love hearing about it because it sounds like it's kind of heartwarming to hear about something that's just, it's so sure of itself and so silly and big and fun.
Yeah, and I also have to give huge props to the team that localizes these games because they do such a fantastic job of, they 100% get it. They 100% know the joke that they're in on how, silly these games are and how silly, the movies that they spoof are. Because it's like the Japanese version is, It's not like the Japanese version of this game is incredibly reverent or anything. The Japanese understand completely how ridiculous it is and are playing off of it. And the localization team captures that and then also is able to sort of, I feel, be a little creative with it and sort of spoof the way that those movies were localized and translated and dubbed back in the day. And there's stuff my favorite part about it is that every single enemy or any broad enemy type has one specific name. So, the giant insects in the game are... Every single time they were referred to specifically as giant insects. There is never any other, literally, there is no synonym. They never say, those large insects or, look at those giant ants. They don't even go that far. It's always, we're being invaded by giant insects. And every single time, they always refer to them completely as giant insects. It's never bugs, never spiders, never ants, never just giant bugs, large bugs, gargantuan insects, never anything like that. It is always specifically the phrase giant insects, which is the way you're supposed to do that if you want to do it the very silly way. And I appreciate it.
That's great. Well, I've been playing a new game a whole lot.
All right.
And that is Final Fantasy XIV Online.
Right, yes.
I got that for Christmas. good God, is this game good. If you're wondering where the good Final Fantasy games have been, they've apparently been online. Because Final Fantasy XIV is like... And I am basically going to be saying the things that were told to me by countless critics in the past couple of years as people started realizing, oh, this game's really fucking good.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I have anything new to add to that conversation, but I'll just say the basics. Like, this is what modern Final Fantasy should be, and it's in an MMO package, and it has, a lot of MMO elements to it, but it still is a Final Fantasy game, and a really damn good one. It is, I'm playing it on the PS4, and it is easily one of the most jaw-dropping visual experiences I've ever seen in a video game. Like, I don't know how much money they're pouring into this, but it's way more than that project should have warranted,
right,
given how much of a failure, like, the original 14 was.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know the history, there's Final Fantasy XIV Online, which was such a big flop, it never even came out for PS3, which was one of its original launch platforms desired to be on. And so they made Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn. That's been a big hit. There was Heaven's Sword this year, and you can just get a package that is everything, and you get the whole thing, and that's nice.
Yeah.
So you don't have to, go hunt things down. Kind of like Destiny the Taken King. You just bought it, and you had all of Destiny.
Yeah.
And so, just one of the most jaw-dropping visual experiences. Every environment I've seen in the game, and I've seen a sliver of this game, because it is fucking huge. And I'm resigned, I will probably be playing this for years, and I'll get where I get, and that's what I'm going to have fun with, off and on. And... it's huge. And the music, oh my god, this is some of the best music Final Fantasy has ever had. And I say that ranking Final Fantasy 1, 3, 6, and 7, and 4, I did those slightly out of order, as some of just that could be half of my favorite video game music of all time, top 10 list. And this is up there with those. Just, this is the kind of game where, there's very little spoken dialogue, it's mostly text. And, it's a lot of doing quests and things like that is an MMO. So naturally, I think normally I would play this with a podcast on a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I start doing that, and then a music cue comes on, and I pause the podcast, and I stop doing that. I just want to listen to the music. And I don't know if I can give the music a bigger praise than that, because it just makes you want to be in the world.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, it is so mechanically sound. It is an MMO, and it is a... real MMO, but as someone who has not really played a lot of MMOs before, it's very accessible. It does if you say to yourself, okay, this is going to take a couple of days to learn, but I'm just going to go with it. The game will guide you where you need to go. It has a very good opening, couple hours where you really don't even go outside and fight. You're really just learning the systems of equipment management and questing and talking to people and the story basics and all that. And within all that, the writing is so good. It is so filled with character. It definitely reminds me of, just walking into a town in an old Final Fantasy game and just having fun walking around and talking to people because they were really creative with the writing. And it's those kind of things that you can't get in a modern Final Fantasy and in a lot of fully voiced RPGs because you can't create that much dialogue.
Yeah.
And so it's yes, written text is the way to go with some of these games. Voices are great, but sometimes this is what you got to do.
Yeah, sometimes to accommodate the scope of your game.
Yes, absolutely. And the writing is just really good. Very solid localization, obviously, too. And then when you actually get outside and you get to fight monsters and everything, it's, the monsters are obviously on the actual battlefield, but it is a very good battle system. I would say it feels like a cross between Final Fantasy battle systems and almost something like Diablo, where you have a lot of different, conditional attacks and things like that,
right,
that you're going, in addition to the attacks that you just kind of spam because those are your mains. But you got a lot of other options. For the PS4 specifically, I don't know how it runs on the PS3, but it is on the PS3 too, and that is just an achievement that game is running on the PS3 because it is so ambitious visually. I don't know what it looks like. It might look like absolute garbage, but the fact that it runs on a system with 500 megabytes of RAM is amazing.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, on the PS4, which is much more powerful, looks gorgeous, runs smooth. I think the frame rate is unlocked, so it can go as high as 60, which looks great. And then the actual, it's the actual controller support, and you can actually play it with a mouse and keyboard. You can hook that up to your PS4 and do that if you want, which is cool. But if you want to play it with the controller, it's very good. It's very well adapted for it. There are a couple of wonky things, but nothing where I would really blame the game for it. It's just there are going to be some wonky things with a control scheme that complex.
Yeah.
But it's really cool. I mean, your hotbar is basically on L2 and R2, so you have two hotbars. You hold that down, and then the buttons turn into your hotkeys. And then you can also cycle through and create as many hotbars as you want. So you can go crazy with this if you want.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
That's because obviously I've played World of Warcraft, which is the MMO. And that's something that happens eventually is that you get so many abilities. They get like you just like the bars on your screen just like as you level up just become like grow exponentially, and then eventually it's like you don't even see anything. It's just like you're staring into the matrix and just like all the bars and just numbers on the screen, and you don't even see the graphics anymore.
And it is, I will say this for Final Fantasy XIV, it has obviously a lot of stuff on the screen. You've got your hotbar, you've got your compass/map, your actual overlay map just goes up in the left-hand corner. You don't bring up a full-screen map. And then so you don't have to have that on all the time, but if you do have it on, it's up there. You have your quest log on the right-hand side. So there can be a lot of stuff on there. And I think playing it on a TV actually is really helpful for that because it never really feels cluttered. Because there's still a lot of space on the screen for you to just focus on things, which is nice. But yeah, and then at the start at least, it does it like Diablo 3 for consoles, where once you learn an ability, it will automatically put it in your hotbar for you in a place that feels good to have it. So it plays really well on consoles. That's awesome. And there's a little bit of wonkiness where, like, every time you launch the game, and it doesn't have to do this if you just have the PS4 in sleep mode, which is nice, but if you do a hard launch on the game, it has to go into this, like, launcher thing that basically looks like you're on a PC, and it's just the way it works, it's fine, but you have to, like, log in and all that.
Yeah.
But it could be worse, and so it works fine. And then you get in, and it runs very smooth. It is a gorgeous game. I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say about it yet, because I haven't had as much time to play it as I would like, but I've definitely sunk a good amount of time into it so far, and I think I've barely scratched the surface. I think I've seen a very small amount so far. I'm still doing a lot of, I would say, the very early story stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if it's an MMO, like, that game is designed to be played for years.
Yes,
so
and
you are not going to see most of the content.
Well, and I've heard the story is really good. I mean, that's one of the things people have compared it to a little bit is Destiny, like, Destiny 2.0 stuff, where it's really a game where you can play most of it single player, get through the whole story, have fun with that, and if you want to just come back every time there's more story, that is a totally valid way to play it. Yeah. So you don't have to be hooked in like every single day, like on a World of Warcraft, I think, if you're probably on that.
Yeah.
But I've got, between the base game and Heaven's Sword, I'm sure I've got plenty to tide me over for as long as I want to play it.
Yeah.
And I think it would be a pretty easy game to like put down if I had to go play Uncharted 4 and then come back to it and that sort of thing. It does have a subscription fee, but you look at the game for 5 minutes and you're like, there's a reason.
Yeah.
This is a level of quality that I think probably calls for it.
Yeah, and then it's also like the subscription exists in order to sort of like allow new content to be developed for the game constantly, which is like one of the reasons why you're there.
I've already seen some like seasonal events; those are fun, and it has matchmaking, and it's good. And you can it's like, I want to do this online group activity. Put me in the hopper. I'm going to go do other stuff. When you're ready for me, call me, and that's basically what it does. And it just notifies you. It's like, oh, we found a group. Do you want to play? Sure. You go in. It's super smooth. It's like, that's awesome. That's
back in my day, man. You were hanging around Iron Forge, going into fucking general chat and just like spamming LFG. Like, LFG, I need to go find something for fucking Nomergon because I have no friends. So like, I just need like random people to join me. The fucking matchmaking's for babies, man.
But it is a beautiful game just to spend time with and be in the world of. It's called Eorzea, and just explore and just talk to the people. And sometimes I have so many quests to do, and I'm so involved in just that basic process of talk to someone, go do the activity, come back, that I'll get to an area and I'll be like, my jaw will drop at a new site, and I'm like, stop for a second. You should just enjoy this, savor it. I think a lot of open world games, when they're done really well, make you do that. Sometimes you're like, I've been doing too much. I need to just like walk around this town and look at things. And you do that for a little bit, and you're like, yeah, this is the reason I'm playing this. And so it is obviously very different from a classical Final Fantasy game in a lot of regards, but it gives me a similar feeling I would get if I'm playing, 1 or 3 or 4 or any of those classics, where it's just, I kind of just enjoy being in the world above all else.
Yeah.
And having a good story and characters and all that is great, but yeah. Also, my favorite character creation in anything, because it's linked with all this lore stuff, including all this religious stuff. Like, you pick your patron deity, you have like your different sects. So I'm playing on Elysian, which is like their elf, and there are 2 sects of the Elysians, and then they have their own kind of patron deities. It's really fascinating because you're building your character, which is fine. I don't like to get super deep into like, I want to make the jaw 4 millimeters up.
Yeah, that stuff always just sort of...
Yeah.
I just look at it for 5 seconds and like, I'm never going to do this, because every time I mess with this, I end up creating some sort of abomination, and I have no idea how to fix it.
So I spent like an hour in character creation not doing that, but just reading all the lore stuff they give you, which is fun. And You can create as many characters as you want, and with a character, you can have it be any class, and you can add up as many classes as you want. So this is really like, you can play however you want, as much as you want, and it could be very addictive very easily.
Cool.
So, very cool game. And I have one other pop culture obsession.
All right.
If we're done on video games for a minute.
Yeah.
All right. I finally... So y'all know I love Supergirl on CBS.
Yes.
You're going to hear about it a little more when we get to top 10 time. It's a great show. Just came back last night. I was so happy. Supergirl's back. Anyway, this was on Christmas hiatus. But over the Christmas hiatus, if you don't know, Supergirl is from the same general creative team that does Arrow and The Flash on CW.
Right.
And I have heard nothing but good things about those shows, and The Flash in particular. And The Flash is on Netflix. So I'm like, I'm finally going to sit down and watch The Flash. And I have. I'm about halfway through the first season. It's a really good show. If you haven't seen it, again, I'm not the first person to say this.
Yeah.
But such a good show. Have you seen any of it yet?
No, I haven't watched it yet.
God, it's good. I started watching The Flash. We're going to talk about The Hateful Eight later, the Quentin Tarantino movie. When I went to see The Hateful Eight, I had just started to get the flu. And so by the end of that movie, because it's a long movie, and by the end, I felt like I was going to die. And so I went home and I was just so sick. And while I was home, just lying on the couch being sick, I started watching The Flash. And I know it was because I was in a super vulnerable state and was just super sick. I cried at the pilot to The Flash. There is a scene at the end because they've done this thing with Barry Allen's origin that I think is a recent thing Jeff Johns has done in the comics, where Barry has kind of a tragic backstory where his mother died at the hands of the Reverse Flash when he was a kid, and he's kind of trying to figure that out. And because of that, his dad was framed, and so his dad is in prison. And the last scene of the pilot is Barry goes to visit his dad in prison. And they have this really emotional moment, and I know it's because I was sick and just I felt terrible and all these things, and I just started crying at this scene. And Thomas watched. He's like, "What are you watching?" It's so Barry and they love each other despite the hardship. But I will say it kind of earns it because that pilot is one of the best pilots I've ever seen. It feels like it's 3 hours long, not in a bad way. Just it packs in so much story.
Right.
But it's a regular 45-minute episode. I thought at one point, this must be a 90-minute. No, I'm only 20 minutes in, and he's already got his powers, and a love interest, and a new team, and all this other shit. It's crazy. Pilot is great. I don't think the subsequent episodes have been quite as good until you get to this one called Flash vs. Arrow, which is the first crossover between the Flash and the Arrow casts.
Right.
And there is no possible way Batman v Superman will be anywhere near as good as this little CW episode called Flash vs. Arrow, because even though I have not seen Arrow, the relationship that is etched between Oliver Queen and Barry Allen in 40 minutes and then is paid off in the way they have to fight, which is a super silly comic book thing where Barry's mind is taken over, blah, blah, blah.
The law's comic book superhero crossovers is that they always have to fight no matter how contrived it might be.
Yes, and
we all understand.
It's contrived in the best way possible. But anyway, that fight is so fucking cool. And I know they did it for a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the money Zack Snyder has for Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
Not going to be as good. This was fucking awesome. And I'm going to have to go watch Arrow now because that was so good, and I like the Arrow cast just from that episode. And I'm only a little intimidated because Arrow has 3 seasons, and it's a 22-episode-a-year season show. So I have a lot to catch up on, but it's going to be worth it. So, yeah. The Flash, Grant Gustin, who plays Barry Allen, is great. He is every bit as good casting for Barry Allen as any of the Marvel people are for the Marvel movies. And I think that the cast around him is so great. Part of why I cried at that last scene is the guy they cast to play his dad is John Wesley Shipp, who was the Flash in the 90s show. I didn't watch that, but he's a really good actor too. And there's just this level of poignancy there. Then he has another father figure in the cop who raised him, Steve West. And then, you've got... what's his name? Harrison Wells, who is the head of this Star Laboratories, which is where Barry winds up having kind of his superhero team. It's just the whole cast is great, except for Barry's love interest. It's this giant black hole in the show, which is that his love interest is not written very well, and I don't think the actress is bad, but I don't think she and Grant Gustin have chemistry. And whatever, they can fix that down the road. It's not, it speaks to how good the rest of the show is that doesn't completely work, and... comic book romances don't always work. So
yeah. I mean, it's never been an interesting part of the Flash character in the comics whenever I read them.
And it's especially distracting because they keep having other women on the show who he has such better chemistry with, and it's they can't just course correct that quickly and just ditch that side of the story.
Yeah.
So anyway, but really good show. It's on Netflix, so super easy to watch. And I think season 2 is airing right now. So definitely. It's like DC TV, the shows run by Greg Berlanti, all the Arrowverse stuff, is so good and gets it like so perfect. And they have different tones. I would say Supergirl is a lighter show than The Flash. The Flash is a lighter show than Arrow. But they all feel comic booky.
Yeah.
They all manage to blend humor and pathos and light and dark. And they are everything these upcoming DC movies look like they are not. And it's especially funny because they're making their own Flash movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I think The Flash on TV is a huge hit. Everyone loves Grant Gustin, and they're going to have someone else playing him. That's not going to work. I'm sorry. That's just
it
weird.
seems like a huge missed opportunity, if nothing else. Like, you have this ability to, like, bring in this audience from that Flash show into the movies automatically and, like, build up a relationship with them in your cinematic universe as well as your TV one.
Absolutely. And it's like, you don't have to make it super continuity heavy. It's The Flash. You can just fight a villain. You know, it's like, it doesn't have to be like the X-Files movie where it's like tying together 2 seasons or something.
It's The Flash is a very simple character. People will get The Flash as soon as he's there. Like, you don't need to explain everything about him.
Right.
It's a guy who runs really fast.
And I do get the issue is, I mean, the DC shows have their own continuity, which is nice because they can just do their own thing. I mean, Arrow basically has mined all the Batman villains who aren't the Joker or Penguin, which I actually am kind of excited to see. Like, I think there's a whole season about Deathstroke.
Yeah,
which I would
he's
love
a
to
big
see
character in that show.
Yeah, and I think Ra's al Ghul is in that. So, you know, that could be cool. But, yeah, and it's my only disappointment with Supergirl so far is that I think because they're on CBS doesn't want them doing crossovers with The Flash and Arrow. Right. And maybe they'll get around that at some point. That would be cool to see. I don't think Supergirl needs it, but it so feels like a part of this universe. And I think it can be, continuity-wise, it's easy to just assume they are in the same world.
Yeah.
And at some point, maybe, you know, Kara and Barry will meet each other, and that could be fun. But so far hasn't happened, and I don't think it's going to happen in this first season. But yeah. And the other thing, Supergirl has some of the best TV special effects I've ever seen. And somehow The Flash on the CW, which is the much lower-viewed network, has even better effects. It's like the best TV special effects you'll ever see. And I don't know how the movies could even do it better. Like, just the way they do the blur effect on The Flash and some of the action sequences with him, it's insane, and it gets better with every episode. I don't know where the money is coming from for that, but it's really cool.
Yeah, cool.
So,
yeah, like, it's nice that TV has gotten to this point where, like, with the effects that you can do stuff like that.
Yes.
And it's not like how it was back in the old days where it's like if you had anything that would be effects heavy, it was like you just cut away and have like a reaction shot and it's like, oh, he turned into the Hulk, or like, oh, he ran really fast.
Or the best thing
frames
is the George Reeves Superman where he would always just jump in the window.
Yeah, where you just have the shot of him coming in through the window and it's like there's a charm to that where it's like your imagination can be like, oh yeah, of course he flew there, but there's obviously massive limitations in terms of like story things you can do when that's the effects that you have at your disposal.
Yeah, so anyway, definitely we're in a golden age for comic book TV shows somehow.
Yeah.
Except for that Gotham show. That looks awful.
You should probably watch it before you just make a judgment on it.
I've not heard any good things about it.
I've heard people like it.
Okay. It's a dumb premise. I hate the premise for that
It's
show.
not, no, I don't think it's a great premise, but...
Okay. It's not part of, like, the Greg Berlanti verse. It's a different side of DC.
Yeah, like, it definitely does not seem like it would fit.
No.
Like, it seems like it's way too dark to be that.
Definitely DC's brand confusion. They have 2 ongoing continuities on TV. They have one in the movies that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's very weird. Very weird. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on. Before we get into like just other stuff and news and things like that, I have a little rant. Okay. Sean, I'm going to lay this out for you, and you can be the judge of whether I handled this right.
Okay.
Twitter kerfuffle.
Okay, kerfuffle on the twits.
This actually happened while I was seeing the Hateful Eight also, because, you know, there's an intermission with the roadshow version.
Yes, there is.
All movies should have intermissions. That's my biggest...
Okay, maybe not all movies,
not
but
all
movies of that length or a similar length should have intermissions.
2 hours and 30 minutes or over should have an intermission.
I agree.
I've always thought that. I loved having it with the Hateful Eight.
Yes,
anyway,
absolutely.
I don't think that movie would work without it.
No, I don't understand because like the theatrical run has a different edit. I'm really curious what that is because I don't know how that works without that intermission.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about when we get there. You need it to breathe after the scene they go to intermission on.
Yeah, and the way they come back. But we'll talk about that when we get there. So at intermission, I was out in the lobby checking Twitter while I was waiting in line for something, and so I had just published my TV top 10 list a couple days earlier. Yes.
And some person on Twitter who has tweeted me before, and I guess he's a fan, tweeted me something along the lines of, I can't believe, spoilers, I really liked Doctor Who this year.
Yeah.
Y'all know that.
Yeah.
I said, I can't believe you put Doctor Who above Mad Men. I'm so disappointed in you. You should be ashamed of yourself. And I just texted back, then you're petty, and I'm just going to block you. And I blocked him. And that's because that's what everyone on Twitter does. When someone's a dick, you can't engage with it.
Yeah, you don't engage.
You just have to block them and just be done with it. Okay, that, I didn't think any more about it. Whatever. People are dicks, I block them, whatever. A couple days ago, I get a string of 5 tweets from this dude who claims to be that guy's brother and says, you blocked my brother on Twitter just because he disagreed with you and you call yourself a critic. You should be ashamed of yourself. It's like, you have no thick skin. You're going to have to learn to take criticism if you're going to do this job. You're so mean. My brother was a big fan and you really hurt his feelings by blocking him. And he's still a fan, so you should feel bad, blah, blah, blah. It was like that, and over a bunch of tweets. And I thought about responding to that, and then I was like, I'm just going to block this guy too, because this is bizarre, and I'm not going to try to engage with this anymore. But I want to talk about it on the podcast, because just in case anyone saw that stuff, I don't think I was being a dick. I blocked 2 people who were really rude on Twitter, and that's what anyone who has a following on Twitter that's what they do.
Yeah.
If you follow Ricky Gervais for 5 minutes, you'll learn that. Because he loves to tweet about blocking people.
Yes, he will block you, and he will make it very public, the fact that he blocked you. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even do that. I didn't make any public kind of tweet or anything. That was that is one of the most bizarre reader interactions I've ever had.
Yeah, it's a weird thing with the internet, with the ability that people have to just communicate with people without ever really needing to think about how they're going to communicate, because you can just send this message that's a sentence or 2 sentences long in a minute, and you never you don't really have to think about the input or anything. It's not you don't have to go through the effort of sending a letter, or if you went through the effort of sending the letter, it filters out the moderate things that you only get the really great stuff, or you just get someone sending you a bloody knife or something in the mail, right? And this is there's a really weird middle ground where whenever anyone expresses an opinion, if someone has a very strong opinion that's the opposite of that, they can make that known, and make it known very aggressively in a way that nobody needs to listen to that. It's not constructive feedback.
And here's what makes me curious, and why I want to talk about it is, did this reader, I don't know, maybe he's a listener to the podcast, so maybe he's hearing this, did he not know that was rude, how he said that? And I think that's very possible online, that people there's a line that keeps getting pushed further and further where people think they can say really rude things and not know that's rude.
Yeah.
Because if he had said, man, I'm really surprised you like Doctor Who more than Mad Men. I like Mad Men more. I would have texted him back and said, I love them both. Doctor Who was just meant more to me this year, but what did you love about Mad Men? I would have talked to him. I do that with fans.
Yeah.
And I like doing that, but that's a totally different tonal thing. And that's...
Well, yeah, I mean, saying, you should be ashamed of yourself, or ever, making that personal, it's not about criticism, and it's not about talking about art. You've moved to insulting people. Those are 2 very different things. And as soon as you cross that line, you can't really go back in that conversation. As soon as it becomes something where you're attacking someone personally, you can't then just be well, then let's just talk about Mad Men and Doctor Who. It doesn't go that way.
Right. And it's just so bizarre to me too, because I've been on the internet a long time, and I read a lot of top 10 lists and stuff, and I see plenty of opinions from people I respect that I disagree with.
Yeah.
But my reaction is never to be mad at that person or to tell them to fuck off or something like that. It's, if I were, and I don't really tweet at people that way anyway. I just don't. But if I did, if I left a comment or something, I would just say kind of what I said, oh, I wasn't expecting that. That's cool. And I would also, the other thing I would do is I would read their fucking words to see the explanation for that.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that dude actually read what I wrote about Doctor Who or Mad Men.
Yeah.
If
he has been listening to the podcast, I think it is abundantly clear. We have hours of recorded audio for why you feel that Doctor Who's the best TV show this season.
Yeah, it was so strange, and it's that kind of thing where I really do at a certain point, because this is a guy who I've had... He's texted me before, tweeted me before, and I've never had anything that rude. And it's just, I really do wonder if some people that line on the internet gets moved and they don't really understand it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where people don't understand that, just because they maybe listen to the podcast or read an article or something does not mean that they have a personal relationship with you or me in any way. There's a relationship between us and the fans, but it's not personal, and making it personal means that you are well within your right for blocking someone on Twitter as soon as they say something like that. Yeah.
Also, this is what Thomas said when I said this to my brother Thomas. When I told him about this, he said, "There's no way that was actually that dude's brother."
I mean, no, no, that's not how that's like playground logic. Like that's not like nobody's going to go to their brother to get them to tweet this guy when it's all you have to do is make another Twitter account. It's not like that's a particularly difficult thing to do.
And either way, how insecure are you that upset you enough to either actually ask your real-life brother, which is insane, or to make another Twitter account, which is also insane, but less so?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know the psychology of internet trolls. I don't walk that path. I don't live in that world.
I'm not famous enough to be getting this stuff. That's when this stuff happens, I always think to myself, it's like, if I were at least making some money off this, it'd be worth it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like there's no benefit that we're actually really getting from this.
All right. Well, anyway, I just thought that was an interesting story. Let's see, Sean. We have so many things to talk about. I mean, we've got the Doctor Who Christmas special, which we'll get to in a little bit. You saw the Sherlock special.
Yes.
We have the Hateful Eight, and we have a couple of little pieces of news. Let me hit up a couple of those pieces of news just quick because I think they're funny.
Okay.
Images were released last week from the Doctor Strange film.
Yes.
And the Assassin's Creed film.
Yes. And
I wanted to talk about those because they are both movies I had trouble believing would ever exist until I saw an image from them.
Yeah, particularly the Assassin's Creed one.
Yes.
Was like, it has been in development long enough and has been progressing long enough with like Michael Fassbender's name very specifically attached to it, with him like talking about it in interviews, that like I more or less believed it was going to happen. But maybe in my heart of hearts I didn't believe that, because when that like screenshot came out, it's like, oh, this is like there's Michael Fassbender like cosplaying as Assassin's Creed, man.
Yeah.
Okay, this is like a thing, like they're shooting this. Like this is a thing that is existing now.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the Assassin's Creed movie is something I'm actually pretty optimistic for.
Yeah,
because
me too.
I think, one, it's a video game property that you could make a good movie out of very easily.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I mean, not easy. It would take effort, but you could do it.
Yeah, like, it's not like Doom or something where there is nothing from that source material to allow you to, like, help you make a good movie. Whereas, like, the Assassin's Creed setting, like, is very encouraging. That like, there's a lot that you can do with that setting to make a really good movie out of it.
Yes, and I think beyond that, just like, Michael Fassbender is such a good actor. I don't think he's ever done a bad movie. I think he's incredible. Yeah. And I think he's very savvy about the projects he chooses. Even like the X-Men movies, he elevates those in such a way that those are really good superhero movies, the ones he's done.
Yeah.
I don't think they're like the best, but they're really good. And this one is being made with the director he worked on for the recent Macbeth adaptation, which I haven't caught up with yet, but I would like to see.
Yeah, me too.
And it's got Marion Cotillard, who also worked with him on that. So like just the pedigree of it alone, it feels like actual filmmaking talent is being thrown at this, and you really can't say that about a lot of video game movies.
Yeah. Like, do you know who directed that, like, Prince of Persia movie? Like,
that was Mike Newell, who is a pretty decent director, and that's a decent movie. It's not bad. It's not particularly good, but it's okay. But yeah, that one was so half-hearted in so many ways. Like, you know, no one Arabic being cast except Ben Kingsley, who isn't actually Arabic, but just plays Arabic people a lot.
Yeah.
And he's the villain. So now you have the Jafar problem. Yeah.
I mean, it's something where it does feel like basically every single video game movie that has been made up to this point has always felt like just like a studio-made movie, right? Like, it's the most, like, basic, cliche, like, least creative thing you could possibly do. And, like, the fact that they, you know, like that Prince of Persia movie, like, I never saw it, but everything I saw about it in, like, the trailers and everything is like, this just looks like the most generic fantasy action movie you could possibly make.
It is. I think it's a incredibly cookie cutter kind of movie. I think it's a pretty good version of what it was trying to be, but its ambitions, you know, they're down here. They're not
exactly.
up here. And
it just feels like it's something where they just have access to this property and just like put the name on it, and it's like maybe the setting is the same, and that's like the characters' names are very similar or something, and that's about as far as you get. And then you have like a first-person shooter sequence in the Doom movie, and that's your video game right there.
Well, and it's just I'm excited. I really am kind of excited for this Assassin's Creed movie, because the other thing is, like, I was thinking of saying, well, maybe it'll be a good movie even if it doesn't feel like Assassin's Creed. But the thing is, Assassin's Creed feels like so many different things. I think you can kind of do whatever you want with it, and if it's a good movie, that's all it needs to be.
Yeah.
Whatever tone you want. It could be super dark. It could be kind of lighthearted. Assassin's Creed has done both, sometimes at the same time.
Yeah.
whatever. You could make a really good movie here that actually maybe even augments the game series.
Yeah, I think it's, like I said, the setting is really strong for Assassin's Creed, even though I think a lot of the games are very misguided. Like, the idea is really good, and you can do whatever you want with the idea, which is the most important thing about it.
Yeah.
And so, as long as there are talented people making the movie, there's absolutely no reason why it wouldn't be a good movie.
Right. Definitely interesting. Speaking of video game movies, I just put in my pre-order for Persona 3, the movie number 3.
Oh, yes.
We got that coming.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, are there any good video game movies? And it's those are. I don't think of those because that's so far away from, the Hollywood studio thing that you think of when you think of video game movie. But yeah, I'm excited for the day when a Hollywood studio can make a movie out of a video game property and people don't immediately just roll their eyes at it and assume it's going to be bad because there is actually at least one good example of it. The way that comic book movies used to be.
Right,
you know?
Exactly. Yeah, so definitely an interesting one there. And then for the Doctor Strange image, I think I said this on Twitter, I had not been sold on that casting of Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, but the dude grew the fucking goatee, and he looks the part. I'm ready. It made me laugh. It looked so perfect. Yeah, just the costume and the goatee.
It was good. Yeah. It looks like Doctor Strange, which is what I want.
Yes, I mean, it's funny because Benedict Cumberbatch is a great actor, but he kind of just looks and sounds the same in every role he's done.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But I like that. For Doctor Strange, it looks like he's doing something at least moderately different. He's in a silly costume. He's got a silly goatee.
Yeah,
because that should be fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it.
And they better let him use his fucking accent, because I saw this movie this year called Black Mass. It's the Whitey Bulger movie with Johnny Depp.
Yeah,
really good movie. The biggest disappointment is they have Benedict Cumberbatch in that, and I know he's playing someone from Boston, but if you don't let him use his frickin' accent, there's no point to Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm sorry. Because when he can do many things well, he cannot do an American accent, and that's okay. I can't do a British accent.
Yeah.
But, it's the movie would have been moderately better if for some reason Whitey Bulger had a British brother. Or they cast someone who's actually...
it's very easy, I feel, to excuse something like that.
It's fine. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
something weird where I guess Stephen Strange is technically American, but I think I always kind of think of him as being a British character for some reason. There's something about him that seems like he should have an accent at the very least. He doesn't look like a character that would speak in a normal American voice, I guess.
No.
You don't look at that, it's he's just going to sound like an American dude. He's going to sound like Robert Downey Jr. or something.
Right.
You look at that guy, it's that guy's going to sound fucking British.
Yes.
Look at that cape. He's got to be British.
And we got more casting confirmed for that movie. So Rachel McAdams is in it. She's awesome. And Mads Mikkelsen is the villain. And I'm all in for that, because Mads Mikkelsen should really just be the villain in everything, because he is the scariest man alive. Although, in his home country of Denmark, he has been voted several times sexiest man alive. And that is my favorite trivia fact about Mads Mikkelsen. Because you would not necessarily imagine it if you know him from, let's say, Hannibal.
Well, in Denmark, man, scary is sexy. That's how they roll over there. There ain't no problem with that.
Yes. Anyway, so anything else to say about Doctor Strange?
I'm looking forward to it. Marvel has done nothing wrong up to this point. And
I think Marvel's going to have a really good 2016.
Yeah, and I like that they have just been steadily marching out weirder and weirder franchises to do. And if you go back and read the original Steve Ditko Doctor Strange comics, there are few things weirder than fucking Doctor Strange. That is some psychedelic bullshit. So I hope they go full hog with it.
Well, and I just, knowing that it is Kevin Feige's pet project, that he loves Doctor Strange and has wanted to make it for 20 years, I wonder if this will just be the one where they go crazy.
I hope so. It's the one to do it on.
Oh yeah, because, Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man, I love that they turned into the weird skid with those, but there's still something sober about them. Yeah. I wanna get off the sober path. Just go fucking strange with it.
Yeah, I want a prolonged 20-minute sequence when they're in some bizarre astral plane where logic dissolves and everything is abstract shapes and shit and just flying at you in the screen. If this is going to be in 3D, it should be the most traumatizing 3D movie ever of all time. That's what it should be.
They really should just have the people from the Hannibal show making it, because that's what you'd get.
It's I'm just envisioning that that really long sequence at the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Only if you were almost dead from taking too much LSD. Like, that's what it should be.
Yes, sounds great. All right, Star Wars The Force Awakens, by the time we record this podcast, has already become the highest-grossing domestic American movie of all time.
Yes, Star Wars Capitalism Awakens.
It did it in about 2 weeks. It took Avatar almost a full year to do that.
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious. And there are still people saying, oh, it won't break Avatar's global record. What are you on? What are you on?
Like, could you possibly think that?
It's at 1.55 billion worldwide in 2 weeks, and it took Avatar almost a year to do that.
Yeah, it's
just
not like
momentum.
People are not going to suddenly stop going and seeing that movie like tomorrow. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. We don't talk about box office a lot on here. The Star Wars thing is just so insane.
Yeah.
I just think it's like, I'm following it just kind of giddily because it's so crazy. And I love the movie, which is certainly part of it, but it's whether you like it or we're kind of mediocre on it.
Yeah.
Either way, it is kind of interesting because, and as someone pointed out, this is the first time in, I think, like 40 years that the number one movie at the box office, like in the 40-year span of blockbuster cinema that started with Star Wars, that the number one movie has been a sequel. That's never happened before, if you look at the list, historically. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, someday I'd love for someone to write like a historical report comparing the hype around Phantom Menace and Force Awakens and figure out why, even adjusted for inflation, Force Awakens was so much bigger.
Yeah.
Because Phantom Menace had a much bigger build-up, you know? There hadn't been a movie in 16 years. It was a very different kind of thing. This was a 10-year gap coming off 3 movies a lot of people hated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a crazy just instance of movie chemistry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Are they ever going to make those other Avatar movies? Is that a thing that's still going to happen?
Still apparently going to happen. The first one is supposed to come out Christmas 2017, and they have 3 they're making. They're doing a full trilogy. But, man, I don't know. It's, someone, I think it might have been at Variety, it might have been somewhere else, so I'm sorry if I'm miscrediting this, wrote a really interesting article, it was today or yesterday, about how Avatar became the highest grossing movie ever without getting a fan base.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah, I saw that article as well.
Yeah, and it's so true because I don't think a lot of people hate Avatar or dislike Avatar. I think it's a decent movie.
Yeah, it's fine.
But, yeah, there's no cosplayers for Avatar, there's no fan base, there's none of that. And somehow it had this just, mammoth success.
Yeah, it doesn't even have, like, Titanic has, like, that scene that's, like, at the bow of the ship that, like, entered pop culture and will never leave. Like, it's, like, completely 100% iconic. Avatar has nothing like that.
No, there's, like, half of Titanic is iconic, and you can quote it, even if you haven't seen the movie. Avatar, I think if you ask someone who hadn't seen Avatar what it's about, they would have no idea, because it has no pop culture, like, penetration.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, with Star Wars, it's super easy to understand because it's a good movie, it's a franchise people love, you can look at all the things in the movie that would make people excited about it.
Yeah.
Whether you like the movie or not, it's all there. With Avatar, it's like, it was good.
Yeah, it just feels like it just sort of made a lot of money, but nobody understands how. Or, I mean, like, it's mostly probably, like, the digital 3D stuff, which was, like, really good at the time, which, like... Yeah. That has got to be what it is, because it's like...
Partially, but even, it's like and there was only one other 3D movie that got big grosses after that because of it. So, I feel like it's a combination of that, and just, we're going to see a lot more of this now, I think, after Avatar and Force Awakens. If you open a movie in December and you don't have competition, the sky is the fucking limit.
Yeah.
If you have the right combination of movie and public and technology and all these things, because why Star Wars is going to make an unholy amount of money, and already has, is because... the path is clear for it until March.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing... There are other, like, Hateful Eight and movies and The Revenant that people will go see, but they'll make 20 to 100 million. They're not going to...
Yeah, they're like The Hateful Eight is not a competitor for Star Wars. Like, they're completely different.
Yes. Some of the same people might see them, but, yeah, they're very different. So there's no competition. And that's what it was for Avatar 2, and it's what it was for Titanic back in the day.
Yeah.
Titanic opened in December, so... I think that last weekend of December has not traditionally been a place for big movies like this. I think it's going to just start to default become that, because if you do it right, clearly the dividends are huge.
Yes, until enough people do it, and then it's not anymore, and then it's like someone's going to release the movie in like the summer. It's like, holy shit, if you release the movie in the summer, it makes like fucking just tons of money. It's not even that great.
Well, you're making a joke, but you have a good point, which is that's how it used to be. Is you would put out, like, The Godfather came out at Christmas, I think, and was a huge hit relative to what movies made at that time. So it's
It's the great cycle. It's like movies are old enough now that it's like that's just going to start happening.
Yes.
It's like now we can start seeing like the pattern of history unfold in front of us.
Yeah. All right, we're a few days later than this is probably relevant. Do you want to make fun of Steam for their Christmas fuck up?
I mean, it was a while ago, but I mean, yeah, like that was atrocious. Like that, yeah, like there was a DDoS attack on Steam servers, and then there was some sort of like scripting error or something in their software that then, I think it was a caching error, that then exposed people that if you logged onto Steam, you basically got to see people, like a random account's information, more or less. Like you weren't able to do anything with the account, but you got to like see their like billing information screen, where luckily like credit card numbers and stuff are like asterisked out and stuff like that. But it's still like...
Addresses aren't.
Yeah, addresses aren't, like people's full names and stuff aren't like that. That's not okay. And like the worst part about it was
the response.
Yeah, that Valve did not come out like saying it's like, oh, we are really sorry. This is what happened. We're doing everything to make this right. It was like they released. It was like a day later they released.
Quite a few days later.
I think it was one day later they released a small statement to GameSpot of all places saying like this happened. And that was it. Like, there wasn't even an apology. It was like a week later that they made their first apology and, like, had a full explanation.
It's so weird because if this happened to Microsoft or Sony or any normal company, they would just be on Twitter the whole time saying, we're so sorry, here's what we know, here's what you should do, blah, blah, blah. They weren't even giving people security, like, tips, like, don't go on Steam right now, or something like that.
I mean, they were completely silent. Like, they just said nothing over the course of the breakage, which was like an hour or so, but...
It's worth talking about because, speak truth to power, Steam has the entire PC market, and they don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And that house of cards is going to come falling down at some point if that is their kind of idea of customer service.
Yeah, I mean, their customer service has been sort of infamous for a while, but they've never had something like this before that was like a widespread issue. And yeah, now that this has happened, Valve either really needs to step up their game or they're going to lose to some competition that's going to come up.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's that being default and being dormant and being too big to care, basically. Yeah. And yeah, that's going to, especially PC gamers, they're a fickle bunch and they're tech savvy enough that kind of stuff won't stand,
Yeah, it's especially that it was like their servers got attacked, but the thing that actually broke was their fault.
Right.
Like DDoS attacks happen on those kinds of services all the fucking time around Christmas. Like PSN, it happens to PSN all the time, happens to Xbox Live all the time. You know what happens? They get slow and they get shut down for a little bit.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Like, it is not normal for, like, some sort of caching error to happen that, like, that goes out and that information becomes accessible to people. That's not a normal error or flaw to happen.
No.
That's because of their flaw in the infrastructure, the security that they wrote.
Right. And mistakes happen, and mistakes are okay if you're humble and human about it,
Yeah.
If Valve was humble and human about that, I don't think people would be... They'd be a little angry, but they wouldn't be incensed in the way that I think they were.
Yeah, it's a kind of insulting that they just don't even really apologize for it.
Yeah.
When it's more their fault than these kinds of attacks usually are.
Right, exactly. Like, at the end of the day, Microsoft and Sony don't really even need to apologize for DDoS attacks because there's not a lot they can do about it, but they do.
Yeah.
They're the customer service on it, I think... It's great that we are in an era where console customer service is so good and responsive.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't always.
No. Yeah.
We've lived through some shit. No, it's good now. And that's nice. But not for Steam. So another reason to go console. Console Master Race.
Sure.
Is that a thing?
No.
I'm just kidding.
Just ignore all
Okay, I got a story.
Stuff.
Personal story.
Okay,
My brother, who...
Yes.
And I want to preface this to be fair. My little brother... he is a music composer. He does things with his computer in terms of music and sound design and stuff that do require a huge amount of power and certain technical things. So he finally kind of bit the bullet and built a PC over the holidays.
Okay.
Like a desktop PC kind of thing. And it makes total sense professionally. It's something he needs for his future, and I get that. You don't have to be a dick about PCs just because I'm using a Mac. Okay? This is good for me. That's good for you. One is not better than the other.
Sure.
It's okay. It's like, you can't play Mass Effect in 4K on your computer. I don't want to play Mass Effect in 4K on my laptop. I want to play it on my Xbox or my PlayStation with a controller on my couch.
Yeah.
And if you want to play it that way, I'm so happy for you, but shut the fuck up. I get your PC is cool. I like my computer too, and I'm mature enough to know that me liking my computer does not preclude you from liking yours.
Sure, yeah.
That's a piece of internet culture that I feel like is rubbed off on him And I think he's maybe half joking, but he's half not, and I don't get it.
Sure. No, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
PC Master Race, Mac Master Race, whatever. It's like sexuality. Whatever does it for you, I'm not doing it. It's fine. I don't care. Be happy. Why can't we all be happy?
But in that metaphor, like, what if I were to equate Max and Apple with, like, pedophilia? Like...
That's if you were online, you would do that.
Yeah, but, like, I'm just saying, like, if we're working in your metaphor of, like, sexual preferences... Like, what would are you...
Normal sexual preferences, legal sexual preferences.
Okay. I was just curious, because, I was just exploring the arguments possible.
All right. Well, anyway, Sean, let's hit the movies first.
Okay.
I have a couple movies to talk about, but some of them are on my top 20, so we'll get to those later. One of them is The Hateful Eight, but you saw it too.
Yes.
So, very rare thing, Sean and Jonathan talk about a movie that isn't a giant blockbuster.
Yeah.
Yay.
Which I think maybe the last time we did this was with Django Unchained.
Might have been.
Yeah.
Although, that was part of a very different discussion where it mostly became about you going to 3 movies over Christmas and having nothing but bad experiences. Do you remember that
right,
one?
Yeah. I forgot that was in such a short period of time, but yes. Django Unchained was the one where the fire alarm went off during watching the movie near in the last act, and we had to leave the theater for like 50 minutes.
And I am curious to hear about this because you saw the roadshow version of Hateful Eight.
Yes.
So before we even get to the quality of the film, where did you see it?
I actually don't remember the
Was
name
it the Continental?
I think so.
Okay, up in Denver?
Yeah.
And I saw it was Mr. Promenade. And those are the 2 theaters in town that showed it on 70mm. So together, we can report on the entire Colorado presentation of that movie.
Yes.
I mean, how did it look? How did they show it? What did they do for the extra wide ratio? I'm really curious.
I mean, I don't know nearly as much about this stuff as you do, and it was mostly fine. Like, it seemed... Like, there was a small error in the projection that was a little bit frustrating, that was only noticeable in shots where almost the entire frame was white, which happens because this movie's set in the snowy mountains, so that happens, but it's not like the whole movie. And in those scenes, it became noticeable that I suspect it had something to do with, like, the shutter rate or something on the projector not being quite right, because you could see when there was enough white on the screen, you could see a flicker of it going, like, being black, and it was like you could almost, like, see in between the frames.
That's interesting. That is how film is supposed to look, but it's probably not supposed to be that noticeable.
No, it was definitely noticeable, because I saw it with my dad and my brother, and during the intermission, like, they both brought it up, and because my brother was like, "Is that like a part of what 70mm is?" I'm like, "I'm pretty sure that's not, because it definitely doesn't look right." Like, it was pretty distracting in, like, again, it was definitely not the whole movie, but in, like, the handful of shots where it was, like, very, like, almost the entire frame was white, it was very prominent.
Okay, that's interesting, because it's one of the things I love about film when it's shown right is that slight effect where it kind of glows or moves a little bit.
No, it was like you could see that the whole frame was black for, like,
that's a problem.
Split second.
That is a shutter issue, yes. Yeah. Because if you don't know how physical film works, you're actually seeing 48 frames a second, and 24 of them are the film, and 24 are just black. Yeah. It goes frame black, and that's what creates the illusion of movement. It sounds like you were seeing more black than frame.
Yeah.
And that's a big issue, yeah. And of course, if you don't know, with the Hateful Eight, so 70mm roadshow, which I applaud them for doing. I think it's really cool. I think it was an awesome thing to try. I don't know if it'll ever happen again because there were a lot of issues with it, sadly.
Yeah.
But they basically 70mm is a old format. Movies are shot in it every now and again. Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master from 2012 was also shot on 70mm, although not Cinerama, like giant cinemascope kind of thing. And so it happens once in a while, but movies have not been shown on 70mm in years. I think the last wide distribution of a 70mm film was Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet in the 90s. So Tarantino shot it this way, and then wanted to show it this way, so there were 100 screens in the United States that did a one-week road show, which is a callback to, like, movies from the 40s and 50s and 60s, where it would show in certain cities, and you would have a slightly longer cut often, you would have an intermission, you would have an overture and entr'acte and all that good stuff, and you would have a program, and they would show it on big 70mm, beautiful format, and that's what they were kind of trying to replicate here. And I really enjoyed the experience, but it's clear there were issues because there aren't that many 70mm projectors left, and very few of them are in good condition. So the Weinstein Company basically bought, I think, about half of the working 70mm projectors in the country. That's a big deal. And they had to repair a lot of them. They had to go to these theaters individually, train staff. Most of these theaters, you got to keep in mind, do not have projectionists on staff anymore. If you did this even 5 years ago, I think it would have gone much smoother because you would have union projectionists in the building.
Yeah.
They have all been fired, which is really sad because we've talked about it before, it's an art form, and you can't just let a computer do it, even if you're doing digital projection.
Yeah.
You can fuck up really easily.
As has happened to me several times.
Yes, and me. So, I was seated at the Westminster Promenade, and I think it was pretty good. Did not have the issue you said. I think they had it slightly out of focus, and I could notice it. And to be fair, very tough to focus a movie like this. It's tough enough to focus a anamorphic frame, which is 235:1. This is 276:1.
Yeah.
So giant lens, very hard to focus. It was in focus in the center and a little out of focus on the sides. And they did a weird thing where, since it's 276:1, and obviously theater screens today are not equipped to show that, they had it. I think they were supposed to letterbox it, which would be black on the top and bottom. And what they did at the Promenade is they just showed it at the top of the screen and had the bottom black.
Huh.
Did they letterbox it for you?
I think it was letterbox for mine.
Good.
They definitely did not do what they did for yours. No,
because the problem with that is that you get a lot of light refraction off that empty space on the screen.
Yeah.
And so while the Hateful Eight has this moments you're talking about where it's bright white, there's a lot of scenes that are dark.
Yes.
And it was tough to see them because there was light refracting back on the screen. And so I thought the print looked beautiful. I thought there were a lot of moments that were kind of stunning because, and then the photography. Robert Richardson is a god among men, among cinematographers. This is a beautiful looking movie. I think it's the best Tarantino movie in terms of visuals and just aesthetics. The shooting on this is incredible.
With that,
And I'm glad I got to see it on 70. I wish I could have gotten to see it on 70 like 5 years ago when they were maybe more equipped to do this.
Yeah, it's definitely like, and that little error in the projection, like, again, I don't want to like make that sound like it, because it was not enough for it to like affect my opinion of the movie in any way. Like, it was just like that slight thing I noticed. It was like a little bit disappointing in some of those really like wide shots where it was like almost all just the mountainside. It was the only time I really noticed it. But other than that, like I thought it was really good. Like it was clear that it was not a digital projection. Like it was like very visually noticeable, and it looks good. Like it's a really good looking movie, and it's really good to see it that way.
Absolutely. And I have seen my fair share of prints in life, including multiple 16mm prints a day and or week in film schools for 5 years. So I see a lot of prints.
Yeah.
This did not look appreciably better to me than 35mm does, and I think that's because of the projection issues. At its best, 70mm should just be, because I have seen IMAX 70mm several times, and that is fucking jaw-dropping. This should have looked more akin to that, and I think that some of the projection issues, including these just being old projectors that probably did not have the best lenses and bulbs in them.
Yeah.
It looked very good, but not great, and it probably should have looked great. But I still applaud them for trying it, and I think it was a cool experience to go in there, and at least my showing was completely sold out. In fact, it was really tough to get tickets.
Yeah.
And for an adult drama like this to have that kind of fervor around it is so cool. Yeah. It's so cool. And then having the program and the intermission and all that, it was definitely one of my favorite theatrical experiences of the year, and I appreciate it for that.
Yeah, like it was like one of those things where it sort of, even though like obviously we were not really alive for when that was a thing, like it weirdly makes you nostalgic, because I feel like it is a part of like the culture that like you understand that there was this like sort of event in ceremony to going and watching films that doesn't really exist anymore. And it was interesting to sort of like see that and be like, yeah, this is why people go to movie theaters.
Yes.
It's like because the only reason I go to movie theaters now is because I want to watch the movie before it comes out on DVD or on streaming. And that's the only reason why I really go to movie theaters. I don't really care. I don't like want to get concessions or anything because they're overpriced and I don't like them that much. Like sometimes if it's like the audience thing can be fun for some movies, but usually it's a detraction if it's anything. It's usually I don't feel like it enhances that much. And then there's just like all the detriments to it just being more expensive, you not being able to like change the, like if there's an issue with like the volume or something, you can't fix that. It's like if it sounds like it's too quiet to you, you just have to be like, well, they just did not calibrate the audio appropriately for this screening, and you just have to deal with that. It's like if you need to go to the bathroom, you just have to miss part of the movie, or you just have to sit there and like hold it in. Like all of those things are shitty, and I don't like them. And there's nothing else about going to a movie theater that feels like it's a better experience than what I could get at home. If it was something like this where you have like the intermission and you have the program and you have like a version of the film that is visually better than what you could watch at home and is like noticeably so, like that is a reason to go to a fucking movie theater.
Absolutely. It's so cool. And if nothing else, I hope this resurrects the roadshow idea because it's so good. Like, and a couple of filmmakers have done this for like the DVD versions of their films, like the Lord of the Rings movies on extended cuts. They have, it's not a technical intermission, but the disc break, and I always observe that. I take a 15-minute break there. It's fun.
Yeah.
And when I watch, I love Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven director's cut, did a roadshow version where the overture and the intermission. Fantasia, the classic version of that, as an intermission, and when I watch that, I observe that.
Yeah.
Some musicals and other movies do that, and I like that in movies. It's such a good thing to do if your movie is of sufficient length, and sometimes even if it isn't, it's a nice thing to have, and I think it makes it feel so big and theatrical, and that's one of the things I love about The Hateful Eight as a movie and as an experience is I think Tarantino really just made a good effort to make this feel special, and I like that about the movie.
Yeah, me too.
But let's talk about the movie. We haven't talked about our opinions. Right. I like it. What did you think?
I like it. I feel like it. I have kind of the same opinion I have on this movie as I do for most Quentin Tarantino movies, that there's a lot about it I really, really like, but I think that overall, I think, like, especially for this, like, the obvious thing is, like, that there's, like, a split in the middle that when you watch, like, the cut that we saw with the roadshow is where the intermission is, and the movie is very different past that split than it is before that split. And I think it's almost everybody I've talked to or, like, seen reviews online have said they prefer the first half, and I prefer the first half. And I think, like, the second half, there are moments where it's interesting, but I think the movie kind of feels like it falls apart to me in a way, and that it's like it doesn't execute on the build-up that it had at the beginning, and that's frustrating, but it's not a flaw that's, like, terrible or anything. It's just like it's not as good as it could be.
Right, and The Hateful Eight made my top 10 lower than other Tarantino movies have. I mean, Django Unchained was my favorite movie of the year it came out, Inglourious Bastards, I don't know where I ranked it the year it came out, but it would now, looking back, be my number one movie of that year. So I really liked his recent work. This is overall one of my least favorite Tarantino movies. I would put it above Reservoir Dogs and Death Proof and below everything else. Although everything else I consider it to be really great. Some of my favorite movies. Yeah. So, but I liked this. I think I agree. I think the first half is some of the best stuff Tarantino's ever done.
Yeah, I agree.
It is a solid hour and about 40 minutes of just kind of perfection. Just the pace of it. I love how slow it is. I think it takes the time to do what it needs to do. The dialogue is so good. The acting in this movie, first half, second half, wherever you are, fucking phenomenal. Yeah. The visuals are phenomenal. The sense of mystery to it, the sense of atmosphere, the sense of build-up. I mean, we're going to go into some spoilers here, but the first half ends with Samuel L. Jackson giving the big speech about what he may have done to Bruce Dern's son, and he and Bruce Dern get engaged in this duet where Bruce Dern isn't talking, Samuel L. Jackson is talking as much as he ever has in his career. Yeah. And it's this tension that has been building the whole movie. It snaps, you go to intermission, brilliant.
Yes.
Just brilliant. And I think the cast in this movie I love because it's basically the Tarantino players plus some new faces like Bruce Dern and Jennifer Jason Leigh, but you've got, Kurt Russell's been in these before, Samuel L. Jackson, Walton Goggins briefly in Django Unchained. I love having Eli Roth again playing Eli Roth is so good in this. I love and Michael Madsen, who really should be in everything but isn't. Yeah. And, I think Walton Goggins, I don't know if I've ever seen an actor have more fun in a movie than Walton Goggins is here. He's so good. Having so much fun. Kurt Russell has not been this good in years.
Yeah, it's like that was kind of almost my favorite part of the movie is that it's like Kurt Russell just isn't in any movies these days. It's like you see him, it's like, God damn it, I love Kurt Russell so much. He's so much fun.
This is what Tarantino does well. Is he takes a beloved actor who maybe is a little out of the spotlight and says, no, you still got it, man. He did this for John Travolta back in the day. He did it for Pam Grier and for Robert Forster and Jackie Brown. He does this all the time, and he's so good at that specifically. Yeah. And Kurt Russell is as good as he's ever been. He's so good in this.
He's so good.
And that beautiful beard. Yeah. How did he grow that? I don't know, but he is a man through that beard. I have a man crush on that beard. Yeah. It's so great.
Then also, I think this is the best Samuel L. Jackson has ever been in the movie. He is so good in this movie. And I like Samuel L. Jackson a lot, but he's got that quality that a lot of actors have, like a John Wayne kind of quality, that it just feels like he's playing himself in every single movie. And here, it's not necessarily like he isn't, but I feel like this is the most Samuel L. Jackson role that has ever been given to him, so it just works perfectly.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful. And between, this and Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown, it is clear Tarantino uses him better than anyone else. Yeah. And Django. He's really good in Django, too. Yeah. But, this is his first this is his biggest role he's actually ever had in a Tarantino movie. He is the de facto lead in this. Yeah. And he is just amazing. I mean, that scene, He's good in every scene, but that scene that we go to intermission on, oh my god. I mean, the fascinating thing about this movie, and I think this movie brings up a lot of fascinating moral points and thematic ideas, and I don't think it follows through on them perfectly, but I like the movie for trying anyway. I think it's one of those movies where the thematic ambition is high enough that it almost doesn't matter how well it pays off on it. It's still interesting and intriguing.
Yeah.
And part of it is the idea of hatred and anger and how it is this poison and this cancer, and that you start the movie thinking Samuel L. Jackson is the hero. He's the character who you're interested in. He seems much more noble than some of the others, much more sensible, seems like the lines are, to be crude, black and white.
Yeah.
And you think the Bruce Dern guy is just kind of a dick because he's an old racist Confederate, and Walton Goggins is probably a dick because he's a racist Confederate, and Samuel L. Jackson is the cool black guy who's, stood up to the white man and he's had his day in the sun. And he's got his letter from Lincoln, and then, no, he is a fucking monster. Whether that story is true or not, and I love that you don't know.
Yeah. He's
a monster either way. And you feel really bad for Bruce Dern by the time he dies.
And there's and in a really weird way, there's no more tragic moment I've seen in a movie in a very long time than when Kurt Russell finds out that the Abraham Lincoln letter is a lie. There's just something so heartbreaking about that, because it's also because he's such a likable character, and it's kind of like what you were saying, where it's both that you just feel really bad for him, but then you also see that, because then he takes the racist turn at the end of that scene with, the lines is I guess it's true what they say about you people, you all are fucking dirty liars. Right. It's you see this, the way that sort of evil or anger or whatever lies, sin, the way that it kind of infects people and just it makes everybody worse, and when you are bad you make the people around you bad also.
Yes. And I mean, I love Tarantino's focus on race in his movies, and I think I don't like the people who not dislike them as people, but I don't like the thought that he's not allowed to talk about race seriously because he's a white guy and he's got this exploitation feeling to him.
Right.
I think films like Jackie Brown and Django Unchained and Inglourious Basterds have very real things to say about race and hatred and history and culture, and I think they're very interesting things. And whether you like what it says or not, they are worth engaging with, and I don't like the people who say it's not worth engaging with. And I think Hateful Eight is one of his most interesting ones so far, and I think setting it post-Civil War the way he does, immediately post-Civil War, where America is this giant, raw, festering wound, and just showing that and saying, this is what we were. In many ways, this is what we are. The movie is about today as much as it is about then, and just a nation that is just consumed by hatred, just completely on every level. And you really only have the one major black character in the movie. Yeah. And I think that's also very intentional and interesting. You have the one Mexican character, and I think my favorite part of the whole second half is when you take the turn and the twist about who owns Minnie's Haberdashery. Yeah. And how much that recolors everything you know about Samuel L. Jackson and Kurt Russell and all those characters. It is very interesting. And again, I think it falls apart a little thematically in the end, but again, I mean, that scene between Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Dern is one of the most interesting statements he's made on race so far. And the simple fact of the matter is, there is no other mainstream filmmaker who is white who is trying to use his capital to have really serious conversations about these things.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true.
And I respect that. I don't know what else to say. I respect that because he makes very entertaining movies and very silly movies in a lot of ways and crazy. But there's something at their heart that a lot of directors who are this famous and have this much of a creative capital to them would not risk their careers in the way he does every time out to bat by talking about things this heavy. Yeah. So, and I like that about The Hateful Eight too. On top of it being a very entertaining movie and very well acted and all those other things. So the second half, I don't think neither of us would say it's awful or anything.
No, yeah, it's definitely not awful. It's always something when you're talking about Tarantino or any film like this that you have to understand the scale of where it is, that when you're making criticisms about I think it kind of falls apart here, or this scene is bad and stuff like that, it's it's still way above the quality that most movies ever reach in their heights. Yes. Generally. It's because Tarantino has that sort of skill as a director at this point, but for looking at the movie and what it potentially could be and stuff like that, I definitely think the second half is really messy.
It's messy, and my biggest problem, there's a couple issues. I think a lot of it is entertaining, and I think
it's always entertaining.
Walton Goggins in particular owns that second half, and I think his evolution is fascinating. and that he becomes the only semi-decent person in that movie, and starting as kind of the least decent.
Yeah.
That's an actual... Because it's interesting. This is not a movie about character evolution at all, except with him.
Yeah.
And it's fairly radical, the degrees they go to in that second half. But, I mean, my biggest disappointment, honestly, Jennifer Jason Leigh is great in this. And I don't think you can take that away from her, and I totally agree she should get an Oscar nomination, all those things. She's fantastic. I don't like the writing on Daisy in the second half, and I think the movie... It is excessively misanthropic, but because she's the only woman, it feels excessively misogynistic.
Yeah, it takes a really weird turn at the very end where it's like... Because there's like a lot of violence acted upon her throughout the movie, and it feels like at first that's building up to something, and then you find out, oh, well, it's building up to like the climax of this movie being them fucking hanging her alive in the cabin. And it's just like... There's like a weird moment where I was sitting there, it's like, what the fuck did she ever even do?
Right.
Like, what... And it's something where it's like, maybe that's supposed to be the point, but I don't feel like the movie's doing that.
I think it's totally supposed to be the point, and I agree with you.
But it's like, it's not telegraphing it well. It's not setting it up well.
No, because I don't think you're supposed to come out of the... I mean, you're supposed to come out of the movie disgusted and hating these characters, and it does that, but I don't think it does it in the way where you come out disgusted and hating these characters in a way where you feel elucidated.
Yeah.
And the problem with the Daisy characters, I totally felt in the first half, like we were building... like. There's all this race stuff going on in the movie, but ultimately it's this patriarchal, privileged race thing.
Yeah.
And then you've got this woman over here, and I thought it was almost... There was this feminist subtext running through it that's very much about this woman who... It doesn't even matter. She has no voice. She has no power in this beyond all of that, and this is a thing that still happens in America today, obviously. And then the second half, the twist is she's as bad as all of them. And to the film's view, or the character's view at least, I don't quite know what the film's view is, she deserves as much as she gets, and she's bad too. And it's tough, because they just keep being sadistic to her, and I think she's obviously not a nice person, but at the same time, she hasn't done anything appreciably worse than most of the other on-screen characters. So
she basically does almost nothing throughout the whole movie, except for in the end, she threatens verbally. She threatens people. Yeah. That's the worst to get. I guess she saws off dead Kurt Russell's arm, but he's dead, so that doesn't really count. It's the worst thing she does is she's threatens people with the gang that might potentially come up and kill them. Who knows? It's there's a part of me that's she could be this totally relatively normal person that just has crazy shit happening around her, and she's just trying to play along with it to get out of this alive. It's something that's possible, but I feel I'm really reaching to try to find a reading like that. The movie's not really doing that.
And here's my two views on it. One, if she were a male character, I think the ending could possibly work, because then it's just a revenge movie ending, and it's okay. But it is materially different when it's happening to the one...
Yeah, the only female character in the whole movie, other than, I guess, you've got, the mini stuff. Yeah. But that's all, flashback.
Right. In the actual Hateful Eight, of which there are 9 people, we'll talk about that in a moment, because I think it's funny. She is the only
nasty
female...
9.
Yeah. They could have called it that, but hateful makes sense, because it's about hate. But anyway, she is the only female-speaking part, and if it happens to a guy, then it's a revenge movie, and, if it happens to Channing Tatum's character, that's one you can kind of fist pump at, but I don't think the movie wants you to be happy about the revenge. So it has to happen to her, but at the same time, I don't think the movie itself condemns that action enough, because it's done kind of humorously almost.
Yeah.
I think tonally, that scene is well-directed visually and staged and everything, but I think there's something tonally off about it. I think the writing's off. And then I think I really like the last scene between Samuel L. Jackson and Walton Goggins where they read the Lincoln letter again, but I feel like it's the ending to a different movie.
Yeah, there's just something where it feels like the movie just sort of falls apart, and it has that sort of almost anarchistic quality to it, that it's just it doesn't know what it's trying to say almost at some point. It's just it just falls apart into this really excessive violence. That's obviously it's a Tarantino thing, a lot of his movies. Django Unchained, the end of that movie, just gets fucking ridiculously gory and stuff. It feels it's far more earned and has, it's set up much better in Django Unchained when it becomes that sort of, over-the-top spaghetti western violence at the end.
But that's Django Unchained is so interesting to me, because that's a great example of violence and theme being intrinsically linked. That is what that movie is about. And I think the ending of that movie is very powerful because of that. This feels like some of the violence feels fun and is earned. Some feels disturbing and a little unearned, and some feels like I'm not sure what it's there for.
Some of it just feels like kind of funny. Like there's a part where, like in the second half of the movie, like you could like take frames from the second half of the Hateful Eight and like insert it into the Evil Dead, and you wouldn't even fucking notice. Right. When like Kurt Russell is vomiting blood like ridiculously multiple times, and like Jennifer Jason Leigh is sitting there and she's like covered in blood and her hair's all matted in front of her, and she looks up at the screen. It's like. Those are shots from like a like ridiculous exploitative like really gory horror movie like a Sam Raimi flick.
I will admit I laughed very hard at all that, and I think I was still on board at that point. But yeah,
it's when like, and it's also like the whole thing where I feel like it's really disappointing, like the twist of that all of the guys who are at the cabin already when you like arrive there, they're all like evil. Basically, they're all the culprits, and none of them. Yeah. Are who you think they are. Like I feel like that's kind of a waste of some of those characters. It's like they just like all of a sudden it's like, oh, these people that seemed like they were interesting and had something more to them, they don't actually. They're not interesting and they don't have anything more to them, and they are just kind of thugs. It's
too bad because you do spend. People have said it's got an Agatha Christie quality to it, and it does. And
it does for like 15 minutes,
right? I like the mystery element, and I like throughout that whole first half and part of the second half, you're trying to figure out, like, who's the guy? And I think that's okay. And if it was one person who wasn't who they said they were, that's great. Yeah. When it's 3 or 4, that's...
When it's half of the people.
Right.
Like, and that's why I say it's like it has an Agatha Christie quality for it for like 15 minutes, because there have been people saying that, and I feel like it's got a Quentin Tarantino scene, which is like any Quentin Tarantino scene is like 15 minutes long. Like, it's a huge section. So... It's only one scene, but it is a long scene, but it's one scene of the movie, which is them trying to figure out who the culprit is. That's the only Agatha Christie part of the full fucking movie, and it's basically one scene. And the whole scene feels like it's almost like a joke that, like, it's all the guys. Like, that's the only kind of, like, possible conclusion it could be. There really isn't a mystery there at all. It's like...
Although Samuel L. Jackson is so good in that scene, and Walton, it's a really fun scene.
It's a very... As with any Tarantino scene, like, it's the thing that I have with his movies is, like, they're all, like, any moment in any, like, stretch of those movies on their own are always fantastic, but it feels like when you put it in juxtaposition and have, like, one contiguous film, they don't always necessarily build up with each other to create, like, a stronger whole. And that's, like, that part's, like, it's a really fun section of the movie. But when you look at everything that was set up and the potential of where you could have gone from there, I feel like it's a really destructive part of the movie because it's the turn it takes to where it's like, that's when the movie starts feeling kind of stupid almost, and that like things just start happening without having been set up properly in any way. That's just like people are just getting shot, and it doesn't feel like the characters who are dying. It doesn't feel like their death has been earned or is poignant or is like it has anything to do with the main thrust of the plot. It's like, well, it would be really cool to have Kurt Russell be vomiting blood right now. So let's have him do that, you know?
Yeah, it's like you said, I mean, there's 3 chapters in each of the 2 halves. And each of those 3 chapters, when I think about them in the second half, I like so much stuff in them. I think, as you say, the whole Agatha Christie stretch in that first chapter, chapter 4, I guess, is great. I think the Kurt Russell vomiting blood scene and OB vomiting blood is fucking great. Yeah. And I think the flashback is really good and interesting. And I think Channing Tatum is really good in his scene. And then I think the ending has some really nice scenes, too. I mean, the second half has one of my favorite shots in the movie, which is Jennifer Jason Leigh playing the guitar while Kurt Russell's going to do the coffee.
Yeah.
Fucking one of the best shots in Tarantino's career.
Yeah.
But, as you say, whereas in the first half, there are just as many great scenes, but they add up to something.
Yeah.
And I think of it as a unified whole. Like, I can't even name as many individual scenes in that first half because it just feels like a movie.
Yeah, it's just every step builds up to the next, and it's like that first half is really tense.
Yes, and then that second half is a lot of great stuff, moment after moment after moment. I can name so many things I love, but as a whole, it left me. I was leaving the theater, and I felt kind of cold. And the movie wants you to feel cold in some ways, but I think it wants you more to just feel something, because that's what Tarantino wants you to do.
Yeah.
And I don't really think I felt an overall impact from it. Whereas, walking out of intermission, I mean, you're hitting the chest really fucking hard.
Yeah, no, yeah.
You're winded walking out of that.
Yeah, that first half of the movie is just absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, so it's just things where, you know, maybe that script needed another pass. There are just some ideas that come out a little half-baked.
Because there's some things like the one that I thought was the strangest is with the Michael Madsen character. Like,
He didn't need to be part of the game.
Yeah, like, I don't understand how the end for that character is not that he actually really was just going home for Christmas for his mother.
Yes,
like,
that would be
how
great.
is that not the end? Like, it's, like, obviously that's the supernatural, like, you could almost say cliched, like, screenwriting cliche of that character with the setup. But it's like, but there's not a more interesting direction to go with that character. That is obviously the place that character needs to go.
No, I completely agree, and that movie needed some level of levity at the end, I think, too, and that would have been it. And again, this movie, I think, is, with all the Tarantino players, playing very consciously on their other Tarantino parts.
Yeah.
And especially with Michael Madsen, I mean, his famous movie scene is stuck in the middle with you cutting off the ear.
Yeah.
And I rewatched Reservoir Dogs before I saw Hateful Eight with my brother because he hadn't seen it yet. And I've seen Reservoir Dogs many times, and it was watching it with someone who hadn't seen it before reminded me of just how disturbing Michael Madsen is in that movie.
Yeah.
And it would have been a great inversion of that archetype if he is just the good son going home to visit his mother.
Yeah, because it's like such an obvious lie, and he's so obviously like this evil fucking dude. It's like and again, like, that's, if you're going to the Agatha Christie thing and like going back to the middle of the movie, transitioning to this murder mystery thing, like, that it feels like what the movie is going to be based on the setup is that you get everyone in that cabin, and then after the intermission, it's going to be about these people killing themselves, killing each other off one by one through the rest of the movie. Like, that is the natural setup based on, like, the archetypes of this movie. And it's like, maybe he wants to subvert that, and maybe that's what he's trying to do. I feel like the natural arc was still the better arc for them to go off of, because there was like so much room with the different characters to go in, like with the Hangman and the Michael Madsen character and everyone. It's like there's so much potential for these characters and the way these characters can bounce off of each other. That's like, when you just find out, oh, they're all like this half of the cast, like the Mexican and everyone, like they're all just evil, it means like their characters just like get reset to zero and just become kind of background thugs, and that's all they are.
And I agree with that. And again, they're all background thugs, and it all centers around Daisy, who is kind of made out to be the mastermind of all this in the film's, structure and construction. Yeah. And so all of these sins have to be placed on her feet. When if you actually look at, as you say, what she actually does in the movie, she is more dynamic and interesting than that, and she doesn't seem like she's that bad, so it feels unearned, and then what happens to her in the end feels unearned, and it all just, and again, and it's interesting because I think in the Walton Goggins character, you have the seeds of what the movie could have been in the second half, because that is a character who carries through from moment one to the very end and has an evolution that is clear and goes through it all. Yeah. And I kind of wish you could have seen that with the other characters, even if it was a non-evolution where they don't change, we just learn more about them. Mm-hmm. But Walton Goggins actually learns about honor in these things, and that feels like an arc out of a more complex version of the film. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and again, that we can dive this deep into the movies is because the movie is smart and well made and all those things. Yeah. So no way is it a bad movie. You absolutely should see it. It's really
definitely,
good.
100%.
But it is too bad it has those problems.
Yeah.
But yeah. Definitely, I mean, there's some good stuff in this. There's so some really fun. Good stuff. All the stuff just before you even get to the fucking cabin. The stuff in the trolley or whatever you call it, the carriage. And Kurt Russell just owns that first half of the movie.
He's so good.
He's so good. The stuff with the Lincoln letter is so great. I think the interplay with Daisy before she even says a word, yeah, absolutely Jennifer Jason Leigh deserves an Oscar nomination. Look what she does without any words in that first half of the movie. It's fantastic. And Samuel L. Jackson is great. And James Parks, who plays O.B., I think is kind of the unsung hero of the movie because he's in the background just getting tortured the whole movie. And he's kind of great. And I think there are 9 people in that cabin. And I think Obi doesn't count towards the 8 is the idea, which kind of works thematically because he's the only guy who has no vendetta here. He's just the driver. Yeah. Still, the math is wrong on that, which is funny. But yeah. So and photography-wise, I mean, this was shot here in Colorado in Telluride. Yeah. I don't know if anyone has ever shot our state better.
Yeah, it's a really gorgeous movie.
Yeah. Our state looks really good on 70 millimeter. It's great.
Yeah.
Definitely cool.
Oh, and the Ennio Morricone score.
So good.
So good.
So good. Ennio Morricone, man. He hasn't scored a Western in like 40 years. Dude still got it.
Yeah, although, like, there's something about it where, like, because that's how they were, like, marketing the movie and talking about it. It's like, oh, it's the first Morricone Western score in decades. And it's like, oh, I'm really excited to go see it. And it's like, the overture starts playing. I'm like, you guys did realize you didn't get, like, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, or the Once Upon a Time in the West Ennio Morricone. You got, like, John Carpenter's The Fucking Thing Morricone. Like, this is an Ennio Morricone horror movie score, not a Western score, which is appropriate for the movie that got made. But it's like, It's a really great score, but I thought it was so funny because it's like, this movie's not a fucking Western. Like, it's not a Western score. It shouldn't be. It's a really great score. It's the right score for the movie. But I kind of wouldn't count it as, like, a Ennio Morricone Western score.
No, it is. I mean, it's actually got pieces of the thing in it also.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a great score.
Yeah.
We just came out, the Denver Film Critics Society, which I'm a part of, we had our nominations announced the other day for our awards, and that was one of the ones I was just trying to push for was, I want Ennio Morricone to be in there, and luckily I was not the only one who voted, so he is.
Yeah, I mean, the guy is, like, easily one of the best film composers of all time. Like, he's incredible.
He's in the top 5. I mean, he's up there. It's great. He's, like, in his late 80s, still kicking it, still doing good work. It's great. And, this is the first Tarantino movie to have an original score. And I think this one needed it because just of the way it uses atmosphere and how kind of generally calm and slow it is.
Although there is a quality to it where, like, the Morricone score is so strong and distinctive that I feel like for the first time ever in a Quentin Tarantino movie, occasionally when he would use, like, some, like, pop music, which is, like, very common for his films, it's a couple of times it kind of felt jarring to me in a weird way of, like, oh, like, it's, like, stylistically doesn't necessarily fit completely with, like, that Morricone score is so strong and distinctive.
And
it's more than enough to carry the movie through that I don't feel like the pop music, like, there are a couple of pop music sections that were fine, but some of them I felt like, you don't need to do this at all. Like, you should just have, like, more of the score, like, have the normal score develop at this point or something.
Yeah, and there's not nearly as much of it as in other Tarantino movies. Yeah. And I liked, you're right, I think I probably liked 2/3 of the other kinds of songs that were in it, but the 1/3 maybe didn't work for me as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely worth seeing, and a very interesting movie. Flawed, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, every Tarantino movie is worth seeing. Like, he's a great filmmaker.
Yes. And have you ever seen Death Proof?
No, that's the only one I haven't seen.
Okay. If you like Kurt Russell, at least watch the first half of Death Proof. I think Death Proof is his worst movie overall because it goes off a fucking cliff after the first half because Kurt Russell basically exits the movie and then it becomes the most self-indulgent thing Tarantino has ever done. It's 4 women, just young, hot women just sitting around a table talking about Hollywood for an hour. And then a car chase that is good, but not as good as it was hyped to be. But the first half is a slasher movie with Kurt Russell where he kills women with cars, and he is so good in that. And I think it's Rose McGowan is the female lead in that half of the movie. Fucking one of my favorite stretches of Tarantino. Just that opening 45 minutes is great, and Kurt Russell is chewing the scenery with gusto.
Cool.
So,
yeah, I'll have to check that out at some point.
Yeah, it's fun. But anyway. The other thing, that flashback section, speaking of Death Proof, one of the main actresses in Death Proof is a stunt woman who's been in a lot of Tarantino movies named Zoe Bell, and she is the white woman at Minnie's Haberdashery in that flashback.
Australian one?
Yeah, the Australian one. She's so good in those 20 minutes of film, and she's so charming.
Yeah.
Tarantino needs to do an action movie for her the way he did for Uma Thurman. Between Death Proof and this, I want him to do that for her because they work together a lot, and she's a stunt woman, so she doesn't do acting
if she's
elsewhere.
a stunt woman, and she can act.
Yeah.
That's your ticket to a great action movie.
Yes.
That's what you need more than anything else.
And his action direction in Kill Bill is so off the charts phenomenal. I'm a little disappointed he still has not done an actual action movie again because he's so good at it. And he's really only done it once with Kill Bill. But yeah, it would be interesting. So,
I do have to say that they're thinking about it. There's one thing about Hateful Eight that I found slightly obnoxious when you said the Tarantino with Death Proof. It's kind of being self-indulgent. There's something kind of obnoxious about him, this being advertised as the 8th film by Quentin Tarantino. That's in the opening credits.
It's what he does.
It's fuck off, man. Really, there's a certain Metal Gear Solid 5 Hideo Kojima part of it where it's there's a line, and I understand, I get it, you're an auteur, you're really beloved, but there's in the line where the ego goes a little bit too far, and when you put your name 100 times in the game in credits with Metal Gear Solid 5, you've crossed the line. When you say it's my 8th film, and you put that in the credits, it's the 8th film by Quentin Tarantino. I get it's the Hateful Eight and whatever, but still, that's a line that I feel you cross. It's don't fucking do that.
I get it.
Kurosawa didn't put that in front of his movies. Kubrick didn't put that in front of his movies. Don't put that in front of your fucking movie.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's part of the charm of Tarantino the same way it is with Hideo Kojima, but it's also part of the annoyance.
Yeah.
So I get it, yeah. All right, well, let's move on. Two more things to talk about on this episode. We have the Sherlock special and the Doctor Who special. We'll definitely talk about the Doctor Who special, but you're going to have to talk about the Sherlock special because I completely forgot it aired, and I think the internet did too because nobody talked about this the day it aired. I didn't see a single thing. A couple days later, people finally started writing about it, and apparently it was really bad, but I heard nothing about it, and I haven't been incentivized to go watch it, so what did you think, Sean?
I would not say it's really bad. I've seen some of those reactions, and honestly, I think the one thing is that, like, it's not great, it's very flawed, but it's really complex, because I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it, because it's not a big deal.
It's fine.
Because it's not even really a mystery at some point, which is, I just have to eventually accept that this show is not about mysteries, and it kind of never was, but it sort of was in the first season when it was really good. But, so, like, this is, up front, it's like it was marketed as and advertised as and set up basically as being Sherlock in Victorian times in the proper original Arthur Conan Doyle setting, which sounded really amazing. But then when you start watching it, you realize very quickly, because the opening of it is basically a, like, previously on Sherlock thing, where it kind of goes through and says, like, this is, like, what has been happening, and brings you up to, like, in brief snippets, the end of the last season where supposedly Moriarty has returned and Sherlock is on the plane and he's coming back. And then you go in and then it's just Victorian times. But based on them recapping the rest of Sherlock, you should be very much keyed in on, this is actually like in the next episode and is a, like, linchpin in where the show is going, which it turns out to be. It ends up being a, like, fairly complex structure where all the Victorian stuff is actually just Sherlock on the plane trying to work through the mystery of how Moriarty could possibly be alive, and it ties into a lot of, like, drug use stuff that I kind of start rolling my eyes at eventually, because people make way too much out of that fucking cocaine.
Yes.
Like the 2 stories that Sherlock Holmes uses cocaine in the original, like, 30-something, like, get the fuck over it. Get the fuck over the cocaine. Get the fuck over Moriarty. Like, I get it. Get over it. It's such a small part of Sherlock Holmes. But because like, part of his being in, like, Victorian times is part of him, like, overdosing on drugs and, like, going kind of crazy in his head. And so there's a lot of it that is really good. Like, I think Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, as always, are fantastic. I think Martin Freeman, as always, like, he's actually my favorite part of these, because he's such a good Watson. And it's like, you don't realize how much more important a great Watson is than a great Sherlock when you're watching these.
Great Sherlocks are a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
Great Watsons are kind of once in a generation.
Yeah, there's kind of only been 2 by my counting. And I've watched a lot of Sherlock Holmes movies and TV shows. And so, and he's great because he's got the mustache and everything. And Victorian Watson is fantastic, because one thing I like that Moffat does really well is sort of take us to the Victorian setting, and like, the way he plays it is, like, basically, and there are plenty of Sherlock Holmes movies that do this as well, but he takes us to that setting and makes it more about what happens, like, behind the scenes of the stories that Watson writes and tells than the actual story itself. So, and part of that becomes that there's an interesting sort of feminist, what starts out as a feminist subtext of the movie, that when it becomes the actual text of the movie, it kind of becomes, like, really obnoxious near the end. But for most of the movie, there's an underline of that, like, well, you have characters like Mrs. Hudson, who she's there, and, like, she's much more of a character in modern Sherlock, but in the original stories, she has, like, a couple of lines that is there to, like, send the person up the stairs, and that's, like, all Mrs. Hudson really exists for in the original stories. And there's an interesting aspect where, like, you get to see the female characters behind the scenes that are not mentioned in the original Victorian stories, because it was the Victorian times, and women were not looked upon especially favorably back then. And they do a lot of clever stuff like that, and there are a lot of really great moments throughout it. Like, there's a great sequence where they go back and they basically do a sort of version of the Reichenbach Falls scene with Moriarty and his psyche, and it's really well shot and really dynamic and a fun scene. And it's just kind of, like, nice to see that version of it. But there's also an aspect of it where it just sort of becomes obnoxious, where the mystery that's originally set up, when you find out that it's not really a mystery anymore, I think it becomes very meandering, and it sort of loses what it's trying to talk about.
So, like, every episode of Sherlock that's ever been
produced? Basically. It has, like, it's another episode of Sherlock, and if you like the show, you'll like this fine. If you don't like the show, you won't like this. If you are somewhere in between, like I feel like both of us are, you will be somewhere in between.
I like the first hour of every Sherlock episode.
Yeah.
And then the last half hour is meandering and slow, except the season 2 premiere is glorious, and I love that one. Every other episode, I like the season 1 finale all right, but then the last scene's bad. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think every episode of Sherlock, these should not be 90-minute episodes. If they're doing 3 90-minute episodes a season, they should be doing instead 6 45-minute stories and actually tell a story. Yeah. I think it's a hugely flawed structure, but anyway.
But I will say, if you are a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes and those original stories, they do a lot of really interesting stuff in this. Like, they have Mycroft as proper Mycroft, that he's in the Diogenes Club, and he is a beastly, like just incredibly obese. He's really fat, very large.
Is Mark Gatiss still playing him?
Yeah, he's in a fat suit. And they make a lot of jokes about it, and it's really funny, because that's what the character is kind of was originally written as, and it has a lot of that stuff where it's like it's kind of like fan service, but it's also like, it's just like, I don't know, like some of the cuts are so deep that it's not for, it's not necessarily references that casual viewers are going to get. Like, there's just a lot of like really fun stuff that if you've read a lot of the original stories, you will catch on to, which I appreciate that that's in there, because there's not necessarily a lot of cachet for doing that. Like, you just have to be a really huge Sherlock Holmes nerd to do that. Like, there's no benefit, there's no like pandering to the audience, I feel like, because it's such an old series. Like, that's obviously like it's from before any of the audience could possibly have been born. That's like referencing that just feels like it's a lot of fun instead of it being pandering, which it could be sometimes in some of his Doctor Who stuff, you know.
How annoying, though, is Moriarty in this episode?
He's not in it that much. He is annoying when he is in it, that is for sure. But the conclusion drawn at the end of the episode is that Moriarty is actually dead.
Thank fuckity Christ.
And that it has to be a larger conspiracy and other groups of people using his image. So, like, although I feel like even if he's dead, they have found so many ways to bring that fucking actor back after Moriarty has died and just like have him be a hallucination, because he's in several scenes of this, and it's like, well, people like that performance. I have no fucking goddamn idea why people like that performance, but they do.
People like that, and then I've seen Andrew Scott, who plays him in several other things. I don't get it. I think he's an awful actor. He's in Spectre. He's really bad in that. I've seen him in some other British shows, and it's just, I don't get it. I think he's a really bad actor. Like, just by the I don't think he fits in these shows where I feel like you have much more dignified performances going on. And interesting. Like, you can have fun, silly performances. Mark Gatiss is not being subtle on Sherlock, but he's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
As always has been as Mycroft. So, Mark Gatiss should have played Moriarty. He would have been so good at that.
Yeah. Well, because that's how they like originally sort of like teased it in the first episode, was that it was like, oh, he might be Moriarty, but he's actually Mycroft.
And I get wanting to reinvent Moriarty. I get that. But you can do it and make it good.
Yeah.
For fuck's sake.
Yeah.
It's too bad, because like the one reason to see the second of the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies is it has a great Moriarty. It's Jared Harris from Mad Men, and he is phenomenal. He's like a classical Moriarty, but played so well that it doesn't feel like stale.
Sure, yeah.
And it's like, if we could get that Moriarty from those Sherlock Holmes movies mixed with all the good stuff from Sherlock, we'd have the perfect modern Sherlock adaptation, but we don't have that. Oh, well, I will watch this. I'm definitely interested.
Yeah, it's definitely worth watching.
I just haven't had time yet. But it was interesting. Like, usually Sherlock is greeted by so much fanfare. I really did feel like the response was so muted by this coming out. And I think part of it is just at a certain point, if you only air an episode every 2 years, you're going to lose enthusiasm.
Yeah. And I think there's something about, like, the structure of this of the episode. It's not insanely complex, but it's a lot more complex than you would normally expect from TV shows, and it's a lot more complex than Sherlock ever does with like multiple hallucination type things. Now, I've seen a couple of reviews online where I was reading it, and like, you just straight up didn't understand parts of the episode. Like, you just didn't understand that like this scene was a hallucination. Okay. Like, you didn't like. So I think there's an aspect of that like I feel like some of the response has been like that, and some of the response I feel has been really negative, because like, I feel it's something, if you understand definitively going into the episode that it is not just a Sherlock Holmes adventure in Victorian London, and you know that it's actually about what is going on, and you know that for sure, you're going to like the episode better, because I don't think, because that's not a fun twist. That's like a boring twist. It's not a dumb twist. It's a boring one. And it's like, you just have to accept it and like not let that color your opinion of the episode too much, because I feel like the idea of them just doing a Victorian London Sherlock story is so much more exciting than another episode that just ties into the main storyline. that was like, when you find out it's just one that ties into the main storyline, you're kind of disappointed. But I feel like because you're disappointed from like the meta story, like the meta narrative around the episode, it's not fair to judge the episode too much on its own by that.
Right. No, I mean, if they had marketed it that way, I feel like the response would be very different.
Yeah.
But, oh well.
But there is, I will say, there's a fun moment at the very end of the episode that's like sort of like it plays with like the hallucination structure, and it makes me that now my like fan theory of what like Sherlock actually is that there's that one Sherlock Holmes original story where at the beginning of the story he is staking out inside of an opium den and he is like fucking out of his fucking mind on opiates. And my whole fan theory construction is that all of Sherlock, including this episode, that there's a master level that we haven't gotten to that's the true level of reality, is that this is all just his hallucination in that one opium den, and that's it. Like, that's what it's been the whole time.
I hope that's the finale of the Stephen Moffat show.
Yeah.
And I hope when they go out, it's Jeremy Brett.
Yeah, I mean, he's not with us anymore, unfortunately. But,
well, that's true. That'd be too, yeah.
Yeah. But no, you just use archival footage, because they adapted that storyline.
Okay,
so you just
go.
do that.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. It's just like in the middle of an episode, it's just he wakes up and you just cut to that episode of the Granada television series, and then just play the rest of that episode. And that's it, and that's the end. That would be fucking great. That would be so good. I'd be really happy.
That would be just Moffat and Gaddis, just drop the mic.
Yeah.
Get out of here. That'd be great. All right. Let's talk about another Moffat production.
Yes.
Stephen Moffat basically owns the holidays on the BBC, as I understand it.
Yeah.
So, we have Doctor Who, the Christmas special, the last episode of a historically good year for Doctor Who.
Yes.
And this was the Husbands of River Song. You and I have not talked about this at all. I have no idea what you thought of it. What did you think of it?
I liked it a lot.
I liked it too.
It's an episode that has its ups and downs. It's
yes.
flawed, but I think like when it hits really hard, and like the end of this episode is incredible, and like
it's incredible.
It's the best Doctor and River Song stuff there is. Like it feels like kind of like what they kept on trying to do with Matt Smith during his years, and they like some scenes kind of got close, but they never quite did it. Well, and this just like lands it 100%.
Yes, I mean this episode is, I think, flawed in some ways. I think it's a little weirdly paced. It's got some up and down scenes, but it's funny. And Stephen Moffat, I hope when he's done with Doctor Who, he just goes and writes a comedy again, because he's so good at it.
Yeah.
But two, it is the first, even though we've had River Song in a lot of episodes, it's really the only one that is actually about their relationship.
Yeah.
And it is so interesting, and it feels like this is what Moffat was always trying to convey. And I think I realized the problem here. Matt Smith and Alex Kingston did not have chemistry. And Matt Smith is a wonderful actor and did a lot of great things as a doctor. Alex Kingston is a wonderful actress. I don't think they had any chemistry between them.
Yeah.
And I think you see Peter Capaldi and her together for 5 seconds, and she doesn't even know he's the doctor. And there's a spark that's there. Yeah. And I think David Tennant had a little bit of that spark in their one episode together. But, yeah, Peter Capaldi and her, you actually can buy the romance angle of it. You can buy that this is someone who matters a lot to him, and in a way that is kind of like an old married couple.
Yeah.
And Alex Kingston, I don't think she's ever been better than she is here, at least as River Song. She's done lots of other stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
And so, and you get to those, as you say, that last scene. I hope that's the last River Song scene, because you can't do anything better than that.
Yeah, it's the perfect send-off for this character. And for a character that it feels like... It's frustrating, because River Song is such a great character, but I feel like Moffat has never 100% understood what to do with her, like with like the Wedding of River Song and stuff like that, and then bring her back in the Angels in Manhattan and stuff like that. It's like it feels like we've ended River Song's story like 5 times at this point. It feels like, and I've been fine with them bringing her back, even though it sometimes has felt a little bit messy, because she's never really gotten the departure that she needs. And this is finally like, yes, this is the way it should happen. Like. And there's kind of not a lot else to do with her going forward. Like, obviously, I'm excited for, like, the Big Finish stuff and having more stories with that character. But as far as, like, the main continuity goes, like, this should be closing the book on that character. And it's an appropriate finish for her.
Absolutely. And, again, you can't say enough good things about Peter Capaldi. Yeah. Because it really does feel like... It almost feels like this is the Doctor Moffat had in mind when he wrote River Song.
Yeah.
To have her with. And actually, it kind of is, if you know the history. When he was casting the 11th Doctor, he had a middle-aged actor in mind. Matt Smith was just so good, he kind of adjusted some of his plans. And I'm wondering if his initial conception of using River Song past David Tennant was for a Doctor with a little more age, because Matt Smith could convey age in a lot of things well. He's just such a completely asexual doctor in so many ways, and so kind of childish in his views on romance. I never bought that side of the relationship, at least. Them being friends, totally, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the other side just didn't really work, and here with Peter Capaldi, yes, you get it. It's been a long time for him since he's seen her, but it's just, she's kind of this part of him, and you get that, and, I like that Clara isn't mentioned in this episode, but she's felt because, one, it's the first time Peter Capaldi has been in an episode, and she hasn't been.
Yeah.
Which is, you feel that. Mm-hmm. And for him, it's, in the canon, he doesn't have his memories of her, but he has memories of loss in general.
Yeah.
And this feels like, but it's not overplayed like The Snowman or something. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more subtle, and it's just, what I love about this episode, above all else, is it's very Douglas Adamsy. It is so Douglas Adamsy, and it's the Doctor having, like Arthur Dent, just the weirdest, most fucked up days of his life, and he's just trying to have a quiet Christmas, and people come knocking on his door, and weirder shit keeps happening, and he's just kind of trying to go with it, and Peter Capaldi has so much fun with that.
Yeah. In like that whole stretch of the beginning of the episode and stuff, where like the premise of it being the Doctor and River not knowing that it's the Doctor, not like understanding anything about that because it's his next generation. Like, that's such a great idea, and they execute on it 100%, and that's like really satisfying to see that there's a bunch of great scenes.
Because I was suspecting they would just 10 minutes in kind of
exactly. That's what I thought too. There was it was just going to be a fun thing for the cold open or something, and it'd be a little bit into the episode, and then she figures it out. But no, you're almost all the way through the episode. It's not until you get to the beginning of the third act that she finds out.
And it hits hard because they wait.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's just a lot of really great moments. I love when she pulls out and she has that kind of the wallet thing with the picture of all the different regenerations and stuff. Yeah. There's a bunch of really great ideas with that.
And so many good scenes between the two of them. And just, I love the entire, why it's such a weird day for him is he's got his wife with him, and he's seeing what she does when he's not around.
Yeah.
And she's exactly, I think, who we would expect her to be. But it's so funny for him because he doesn't... I think the Doctor's obviously a very egocentric person and doesn't really think of the world going on without him. And she's not doing anything all that bad, but it's really funny. She's, being a grave robber and having this big, weird plan with the Halifax guy. Yeah. And just stealing his TARDIS when he's not around. And then the funnest scene of the episode, which is where she's like, just be prepared. It's, it's going to be a shock when you get in this thing. And he says, my turn. And then he goes to the TARDIS and does the big Doctor finally gets to realize the TARDIS. And it is one of the best Doctor Who scenes
It's probably the hardest I've ever laughed at Doctor Who in my entire life. And there's something that I feel like no other actor of playing the Doctor other than Peter Capaldi could have done it like this because of his history with the show. Because it's 100. The best part about it is that it's really funny and over the top, but it's also 100% on the nose. That's everyone's reaction to the TARDIS is being it's bigger on the inside. It's they're acting surprised, but it's really muted. It really should be oh my fucking holy shit! This. My fucking everything, my entire worldview has been just fucking destroyed and put in front of me, decapitated and handed me on a silver platter. What the fuck? What the fuck is this? That's the reaction you should have. The fact that he gets to do that for several minutes, this long speech.
It almost feels like they just said, all right, Peter, go on the set. We'll capture whatever you want to do. Go.
Yeah, I wonder if that was even scripted. It almost feels improv.
It probably was, but it feels improvised, which is why it's good writing.
Yeah.
It feels very spontaneous, and it being that TARDIS set helps because he's doing spins, and they can light it in that dynamic way, and they have all this space to move the camera, which obviously you would not on the classic TARDIS set. So it's so much fun.
It's a great scene. It's one of those scenes where the idea for that scene is so good. You don't understand how in the 50 plus years of this show that has never happened before because it's such a great fucking idea.
Yeah, and then there's the other scene, which is where they have there's so many things that happen in this episode, I can't remember all of them, but some big disaster, and then they're lying in the snow together, and the Doctor just starts laughing because, fuck, this has been a weird fucking day, and he's just going to start laughing, and it's not just a different moment for Peter Capaldi, it just feels like a different moment for Doctor Who, and I love it. this episode has such a big heart, and
Yeah.
above all else, because I've seen some people seeming to be disappointed by the scale of it, because it is so kind of goofy and different.
Yeah.
But why does that... To me, it does the same thing Series 9 does well, primarily, which is that heart and sense of emotion and character.
Yeah.
And it really, on that level, doesn't feel like Moffat missed a beat coming out of that finale.
Yeah.
I think it does in the sense of plotting and pace, because you can tell... I think Moffat was fucking exhausted writing this one.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like that.
It's not bad in any way, but it's just there's some moments where it's like, clearly this is a guy who was manic with exhaustion writing this episode, and I kind of love that about it. But, when it is on, it is so on.
Yeah, because it's something where, like, there's sections of it, particularly, I think, in the middle, where it starts to sag and stuff like that. And it's just, like, you kind of start rolling your eyes because it becomes so ridiculous at a point. But then, like, what really saves the episode is then at that point is then, like, it takes the turn at the very end where it becomes very serious and returns back to, like, this being about these two characters and their relationship.
Yeah.
And, like, just that whole sequence where they crash on the ship and he, like, basically, like, creates the restaurant at the end of the universe, more or less, and with the singing towers. And, like, he time travels and forward in time and stuff like that, and they have their last date, and they find out, like, the night is actually, like, 24 years. Like, all that stuff, like, it's so beautiful, and it's such a... It's a change of pace and a change of tone for the episode, but it feels very much earned and set up properly. That's like it's something where, if like ending in that way allows you to completely forgive all the flaws of the pacing earlier, because it feels like those flaws existed so that this moment could exist at the end of the episode.
And it's not like it takes a total tonal left turn.
No,
I think it's still very lighthearted. It's
Yeah.
very romantic and big and broad in a good way. But yeah, you really develop into it because I like the moment where the episode turns to me, and there are better scenes in the episode, but it is where they're at the dinner table and River goes off about the Doctor and saying, of course, it's like loving the nature or something.
Yeah.
You don't expect it to loving the sun. You don't expect it to love you back, and all this stuff about that baggage she carries because of it. And Peter Capaldi sitting there watching her and seeing it.
Yeah,
That's the turn because that's what's under the surface of all of this, and I
Yeah,
don't think
yeah.
it negates the comedy, and the comedy doesn't negate it.
no, not at all.
It's very fluid in that way.
Yeah,
And whatever. This is the other thing. Just continuing on the theme of Moffat somehow gaining enlightenment and purging himself of all his writerly flaws. This one, whatever problems it has, they are not like the Moffat problems from like Series 7.
no, definitely not.
No, this is a very good Doctor Who episode, and it doesn't do anything dumb or gimmicky. It's just
yeah.
a little... I would say it's just a little frayed. It's just a little rough around the edges, which is fine.
Yeah, it feels like the script could have been tightened up. Is
Yeah.
mainly the thing.
Yeah, but I love the energy of it. I think this is one of the better Christmas specials overall.
Yeah. And I like that, it, even though it doesn't have, anything very explicitly to do with Christmas, there's a couple of stuff that's, more, specifically Christmassy.
There's that great joke at the beginning where the TARDIS
Yeah.
has put
The
antlers on it.
holographic antlers, yeah. But, it's got a little bit of that stuff, but it's more... it's the tone and the theme of the episode.
Yeah.
Of, it's a much more, romantic Christmas than it is, consumerist Christmas or something. It feels like a very classic kind of Christmas that they represent when you get to the end of the episode. It feels like it earns its status as a Christmas special a lot more than, particularly a lot of, the Russell T. Davies ones did,
Right.
in Christmas Invasion and stuff like that. This feels like it's using Christmas as, a bit of an inspiration for the thematic style of it.
Yeah.
Than anything else.
Yeah, definitely. That's good, and I think it's the right note to end this year on Doctor Who on.
Yeah.
To just, because if it had been, we end with, Hellbent, and then we go off for a year, that'd be perfectly fine. But having this as just that little palate cleanser, it feels okay. The Doctor and River, they're on that planet for 24 years. If it takes another year to get more episodes or whatever, that feels like a nice closing note.
Yeah, and it's nice just to, have that sort of, reset button completely hit, where it's you just get that one adventure with the sort of, the Doctor in, this new element where he doesn't have his companion and he's away from Clara now.
Yes.
That, it's a nice little, transitionary episode in that way.
And it's a nice preview for upcoming attractions
Yeah.
because while the Doctor has obviously been opposite Alex Kingston before, Peter Capaldi hasn't.
Yeah.
So this is his first time kind of building a new companion rapport, and I'm so excited to see him get to do that full time next year.
Yeah.
And hopefully he just sticks around for many, many years.
Yeah.
He had that quote that got publicized, if this could be my last year. I think what he means is contractually he was on for 3 years.
Yeah.
It could contractually, he could also sign for a fourth. So
I mean, he's, if you want to take quotes from every single interview he's ever given, like, eventually, like, you're starting to, like, do math where it's like, well, in this one he implied that he might be on for 3 years, this one 4 years, and you're doing, like, the arithmetic to find out, oh, well, how many years is he actually on? Because, of course, all those people give slightly different answers in every interview.
Right. He also actually said that before Series 9 that it could be his last one. Yeah. So, whatever. Like, it'll go until it stops, and we'll appreciate it while we do. Just... yeah, it's clear that this Doctor is built to last, and I'm excited to see the next companion and all that.
Yeah.
So, good Christmas special, good end of the year for Doctor Who, and it did not change my mind one iota of where I had Doctor Who on my top 10 TV shows list.
It seems like it would have to be a really, like, monstrously terrible episode for it to do that.
Yeah. Just said it didn't move it up or down if you don't know where it is. But, so yes, let's... we're going to go ahead and stop recording on this episode. We'll be back in a couple of days. Well, we're going to be back right now, but you're going to be back in a couple of days listening to our big Top 10 Year in Review episode. So we got all the catch-up out of the way. We're going to do some Top 10 lists.
We're going to, like, definitively, objectively, scientifically determine what the best shit and the best stuff of 2015 really was. Next time on The Weekly Stuff.